Hello all, this is Jude, our live broadcast. So if everyone can turn off their webcams, excluding the city council members, and I'll ask Mayor Taylor to bring our meeting to order. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Herring. Good evening and welcome to the City Council's April 7th meeting. This is our second teleconference meeting with all City Council, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. First, I would like to introduce staff and City Council members present. Vice Mayor Drew Combs, City Council Member Catherine Carlton, City Council Member Betsy Nash, City Council Member Ray Mueller is participating by phone, and the staff present, our City Manager, Starla Jerome Robinson, our Interim City Attorney, Cara Silver, and our City Clerk, Judy Herron. Ms. Herron, would you please provide instructions to the City Council and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second teleconference meeting. I appreciate all of you for taking your time out today to do this, and appreciate your patience as we do work through some technical situations. I think we're good to go now. For the remainder of this meeting, I ask that the City Council remain on the screen by engaging your webcam, and ask that you maintain control of your own microphones. Click on when you are ready to speak and off when you are completed. At the end of each staff presentation, Mayor Taylor will call for public comment. At that time, I will reach out to any of our attendees for public comment. You are able to use the hand feature next to your name. If you click that, it indicates that you have a public comment. I will call on you. I will open your mic. You'll be given the allotted 3 minutes for your public comment. At the conclusion, I will mute your mic. If you do not have microphone capabilities, then I ask that you use the question feature, and I will read your public comment aloud to the City Council. For those public comments that were received via web form, they will be displayed and hopefully a larger font that everyone can read. And I will also be reading those aloud in a 3-minute time period. Some of the web form comments, I will be speaking rather quickly to try and include everything written in that 3-minute period. When we go to call for a vote, I will ask for a motion and second. Again, the city and give their motion and second, and then ask for a just to keep clarity in the record. I will be public comment information as we proceed into our item for those who are just joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Herron. All right, we will proceed with our agenda, and we are reordering a few of our items. We are going to start off with the consent calendar instead of the study session. Under the consent calendar, item G, the City Council may take action to approve routine business items in one motion unless a City Council member, city staff member, or a member of the public requests that an item to be discussed or continued to a later date. So, Ms. Herron, do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
So at this time, I will open the floor for public comment on the minutes. If any member wishes to speak, I ask that you use the raise your hand feature. Type it into the question field marked with a question mark. We'll give you guys a couple of seconds here to do all of that. We did not receive the We'll give this just a couple more seconds. Seeing none, I will this meeting back over to the mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Herron. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Item G1. Councilmember Nash?
I'll second.
Ms. Herron, did you get the motion?
Yes, motion by Councilmember Nash, second by Vice Mayor Combs. And for the vote, I will turn to Mayor Taylor. Your vote?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Combs?
Yes.
Councilmember Nash? Councilmember Mueller?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Herron. We'll continue with the agenda item. We are going to combine a regular business item in our study session, but we will be doing that next. The next item on the agenda is H2, consideration and discussion of COVID-19 city responses. To introduce this item will be our interim city attorney, Ms. Cara Silver, to make the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. So I believe that this item was going to be combined with the study session, and Mr. Pegueros has the presentation. If I could ask him to share that with the council.
Excuse me, Ms. Silver, I'm sorry, I read the wrong item. If you're not ready, we can do item H1.
Whichever one you would prefer to go forward with.
If you're ready to do the presentation for the study session in H2, then we can go ahead and proceed.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, this is Nick Pegueros. If we could do H1 first, still working through some technical issues with the presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, then we will go back to item H1 on the regular business, and that is an update and consideration of resources available to small businesses impacted by COVID-19. To introduce this topic will be our city attorney, Ms. Cara Silver.
Thank you very much. So this item is going to be presented by John Passman, who works in our community development department, and he has done a lot of research and outreach with small businesses, and he is going to pull together the information that he has obtained in terms of the mainly federal stimulus packages that are available for small businesses, and then also talk about some legislative actions that the council could take if they wanted to. And then I'll turn it over to John Passman.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Taylor and council members. I'm John Passman with the Community Development Department. This is going to be a short presentation to inform the City Council of resources that are currently available to small businesses and some of the impacts that we've already noted to small businesses during this shelter-in-place and COVID-19 crisis. We also would like to see some direction and discussion from the council on a commercial tenant eviction moratorium, and allow the council room to discuss policy on small business relief going forward. So I'll start with a quick background, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. March 11th, Menlo Park declared a local emergency. March 12th, Menlo Park closed facilities. And then crucially on March 16th, the San Mateo County public official issued a stay-at-home or shelter-in-place order, as it was called then. And this forced non-essential businesses to close until April 7th. And left essential businesses open, but many of them had to modify their operations, modify their hours, and even some of those businesses that were deemed essential shut down anyways due to a lack of customers. As you know, the order has been extended to May 3rd, and further requirements have been placed on essential businesses. Businesses that are still operating are required to come up with social distancing protocols, place those at entryways to their facilities, and distribute them to employees. So the impact that we've seen on small businesses has been difficult to assess. This is still fairly early in the COVID-19 crisis. We have some data already that was collected by SAMCETA in collaboration with the Menlo Park Chamber of Commerce. There were 64 respondents to the survey. It was collected towards the end of March. And it highlighted a couple issues that would be fairly obvious when you think about it, but it gave us some data to back it up. There's been a substantial revenue and cash flow issues for small businesses. 95% of surveyed businesses reported a drop in revenue, a drop in cash flow. This is due to their inability to operate, or they're having to modify their operations or reduce hours. There's also employee layoffs noted in the survey. The 30% of surveyed businesses reported layoffs or employees let go. Most businesses are holding out for the time being, hopefully looking forward and hoping that this is a short-term issue, and that letting go of employees is would be a long-term reaction. Another major component to business expenses that is a difficulty when revenue and cash flow decreases substantially is rent and mortgage, which can be very difficult to modify quickly. So now that we've talked a little bit about the impacts, I want to go over some of the programs that have popped up in the last couple of weeks to help alleviate these concerns with businesses. Chief among them is the Paycheck Protection Program administered by the Small Business Administration. This is came out of the CARES Act, or the federal stimulus package. $350 billion out of the $2 trillion was designated for small businesses. That was to be distributed, or is to be distributed, in the form of forgivable loans. This is a fairly wide eligibility. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, even gig economy workers are eligible to apply. The intention is to get applicants through the next 10 weeks of substantial revenue losses. So the max amount is 2.5 times average monthly expenses, up to $10 million. And the key feature of these loans is their forgivability. So the ability to turn the loan into a grant, which is really crucial to small businesses that were already sort of working on thin margins. Giving them a loan and forcing them to pay it back would be a substantial burden even after the crisis is over. So that's why the forgivable portion is key, but there are some stipulations. The businesses need to use the loan on these eligible expenses: payroll, healthcare benefits, mortgage, interest on debt previously accrued. And they're also, the SBA has put out guidance saying that 75% of the loan needs to be used on payroll due to expected high subscription to the loans. A couple other features, the currently is looking at a 1% interest rate that's sort of moved about as SBA and lenders have sort of haggled over that. So it may change in the future. I think it can't be more than 4%. 2-year maturity, 6 months deferred payment. There are a couple other stipulations that have to be achieved by businesses in order to achieve full forgiveness of the loan. So businesses have to maintain their workforce. It's looking back 12 years, their average monthly FTE count over the, or not 12 years, the last 12 months over the past year. They need to maintain that or be above it throughout this period in order to achieve forgiveness. And if a business has already laid employees off prior to hearing about this program or applying to this program, they're not out of luck. They can rehire those employees before the end of the period and still achieve a forgiven loan. And they can't decrease wages substantially. So they can't decrease wages more than 25% in order to achieve the forgiveness. So businesses will be applying through their local lenders. There have been some hiccups in this process. The whole program was supposed to come online on Friday. Many major lenders were not ready to begin taking applications. Starting today, I think a couple of lenders have started to get their processes going. But we're still looking for a lot of the larger lenders to have their applications up and running. And one key sticking point that a lot of businesses have been pointing out is that the application, or a lot of lenders are requiring that they only give loans to businesses they already have a previous relationship with. Another program that the Small Business Administration administers is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. This is sort of your traditional SBA or disaster funding. Whenever there's a natural disaster, these are the loans that small businesses typically look for. There's some distinctions from Paycheck Protection Program loans. These can't be forgiven. These funds aren't restricted to certain expenses. And typically, the requirement is that the borrower has no other sources of credit available, although we're not quite sure what the interaction will be with the Paycheck Protection Program just yet. I'm sure there'll be additional guidance on that. And as you can see, the interest rate is a bit higher. One added wrinkle to this program that wasn't available for is that applicants will be eligible for $10,000 grants in addition to the loan. So that will be a little bit, will make this a little more attractive as compared to the Paycheck Protection Program, which is definitely a better program because you can achieve full forgivability. But in this one, if you apply for both and you get the $10,000 grant, that will be deducted from the forgiven loan in the Paycheck Protection Program to limit the total amount of federal money that a business can acquire. So taking a more local look, one key program that we've been keeping an eye on, and I think that will be a really important part of small businesses going forward, is the San Mateo County Strong Fund. This was established or put together by the County of San Mateo a couple of weeks ago. They allocated $3 million to the fund, and so far they've had about $3 million in matching from tax-deductible donations from individuals and private entities. So the program details are still pending on this. They're not distributing money yet. They have no process in place to distribute that money. SAMCETA is taking the lead on developing the process. They gave a presentation to the Board of Supervisors this morning. It looks like they're going to partner with San Mateo Credit Union, and it still looks to be about 2 weeks out before they start getting that money out to small businesses. So they've been taking a lot of input from chambers and cities. They collected a survey, or they took a survey for 900 businesses, which includes those 64 businesses in Menlo Park. in order to get an idea of how this money would be distributed. They wanted to determine what the definition of a small business would be. Should it be based on size? Should it be based on revenues? And so all that's sort of where they're at in trying to determine how they're going to get that money out. And it's expected to be grants and not loans. So finally, I just wanted to highlight some of the bigger players, especially in our local areas for our local businesses. Samsita, as I pointed out already, has been working very hard on the San Mateo County Strong Fund and putting together that plan. They've also put out an excellent list of resources for businesses. This is what the city links to. We've identified it as the best business resource list. And this is what we're trying to get out to businesses. It lists everything that's been brought into this presentation and a lot more as well. They've also put together a continuity action plan, which has a checklist that businesses or business owners can go through to see if they're doing everything they can to sort of cut costs and make sure that the business is running lean through these tough times. The Menlo Park Chamber of Commerce has also been a crucial partner, a crucial player. They put together the adapted hours of operation list that lists the hours of dining establishments, whether they're still open, sort of what their modified form of service might be. And the Chamber is also working on expanding that out just food serving locations to retail and other places. It's also been instrumental in the Zone Haven GIS map, which is just a different way of illustrating that information that's being put together by the county. And then the Chamber also is looking at putting together a second survey, something a little bit more comprehensive than the one that the initial one we have, so that we can get a better idea of what the impacts have been on businesses up to this point. So that's a brief overview of some of the programs that are available for businesses. It's certainly not an exhaustive list, and it's also a very dynamic list. A lot of these programs are changing. They're currently being stood up. So there's definitely like this presentation and the staff report had to be updated up to the last minute just to make sure that the information was as fresh as possible. So a little bit of a disclaimer there. But the reason we wanted to bring that information to council is to get some direction and have some consideration from the council on a couple of items for relief for small businesses. One of them is a commercial tenant eviction moratorium. So the County of San Mateo adopted one this morning for unincorporated areas. And it was specific for small businesses, which they defined as businesses with annual gross receipts of less than 2.5 million. And then the city of San Mateo has already put together a similar ordinance, with a more generous definition of small businesses. So what we're looking for today is some council feedback, discussion for the need for a commercial eviction moratorium in the city, and then hopefully a further discussion on needs for other programs to help businesses. And that's my presentation. Thank you. I'll stand by for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Passman. Are there any follow-up questions from the council? Councilmember Carlton?
Forget how to unmute. Am I unmuted? Great, just figuring this out. How many businesses in Menlo Park have taken advantage of this at this point, or do we have any indication of how many might be taking advantage of this? Because it seems like there's some good programs. I was just wondering the impact at this point, or do we know, is it too early?
Hi, Councilmember Carlton. As far as the Paycheck Protection Program, no businesses have taken advantage of it yet. That money is still, they're still working out the kinks on the lending program. And then the San Mateo County Strong Fund also is similarly, there's no one that could have taken advantage of it. I think some businesses have applied for the disaster loans, but I'd say it's too early for us to say exactly how many businesses have taken advantage and of which programs they've taken advantage of.
So I'm concerned to make sure that our local small businesses are aware of all the programs that are available to them. And I'm sure Fran and the people at our Chamber of Commerce are doing a good job. But I just wanted to make sure for example, the gentleman that owns Angelo Mio, a wonderful, amazing part of our community. I think so many people love that restaurant. They're in the midst right now of doing a renovation, which I'm sure is now halted. I want to make sure that people have reached out to him to let him know that these things are available, because I'm sure it's crushing him that while other restaurants are able to send things out for delivery, he's not, because he's in the middle of renovating his business. And that's just an example of me wanting to make sure that people who are loved in our community that own businesses are aware of everything that's available to them.
Vice Mayor Combs?
Well, I didn't, was that a question for Councilmember Carlton? Was he expecting staff to respond? I didn't want to.
Yeah, I'd like to know, are we mailing out to everyone, to all the businesses? How are we reaching out to make sure that they're aware of this? Because a lot of people may want to take advantage of the different things, but they only may know of one or two.
So we have been doing outreach. There's constant email blasts. We've been trying to get out that information as much as possible. I know Fran with the Chamber is also in a similar position that, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there, and businesses probably have difficulty parsing through all of them and which ones are the best and which ones are the best for them. So yes, we are trying to get that information out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a Vice Mayor Combs.
Yeah, so then my question, you talked about some of the efforts at the county level, including the commercial eviction protection and then the San Mateo County Strong Fund. Do you know of any cities that have sort of started up or created sort of some direct funding mechanisms to support their small businesses, similar to the sort of San Mateo County Strong program, but then at the very local level?
Yes, there are a couple. I don't have extensive information on that, but I believe Mountain View and Hayward are a couple examples of cities that have put together funds for grants, and I think Mountain View's was around $700,000.
And do we know in a general sense, or could you share sort of like the parameters? Do we know at all for some of these funds or direct funding mechanisms that have been established?
So no, I don't have that information available right now.
All right, totally fair.
Councilmember Nash.
So I believe that Redwood City last night allocated $300,000 for small businesses in Redwood City, and they're actually administering it through San Mateo County because I guess they're only taking a 1% administrative fee. And so they've actually somehow are working with the county to administer that money for Redwood City. So there's an example of a city that's actually just adding something to the San Mateo County funding.
Councilmember Nash, did you have a question or for Mr. Passman?
I think mine are more comments later. But one of my concerns is that I know that at least one of the, well, basically businesses, there are some businesses, I know of one downtown who are not on the internet. And so I do know that Fran reached out via phone at one point, but I'm concerned that we make sure that people get the information. I've been bringing down paper copies of a lot of actually, thank you very much for the staff report. It was excellent. And so I brought them a paper copy of the staff report and also some of the information that I've been getting from the city. But just, I'm sure there's other businesses that are not on the internet and are having trouble getting information that's not, since so much of it's online. So whatever we can do to support them, that would be great. And in addition, I'm just wondering how, are we pretty sure that we're reaching all different businesses within the city? I emailed one today to Jonathan, to you and Fran, that I was aware of that's open. How are we making sure that we are covering the entire city? And, or do you want us to look in our district and make sure that we're doing that, or how can we assist?
So the list that we use, at least for the email blast, I know is fairly extensive, and I've actually, when I followed up, because I followed up with a fair amount of businesses, especially on some of the social distancing protocols that they have to have posted, I've been fairly impressed with the reach we've had through there. I don't know if I don't know how the council could be able to help in that regard. I do understand that not every business has access to the internet or is on those email blasts, so there could possibly be some benefit to a physical mailers, but I've also, many of the businesses that have closed down wouldn't be checking their mail at their physical locations as well, so that also may be ineffective. So it's something to consider.
Where's the best list of all the businesses that have been contacted? Would it be possible to see that, and just for council members and to take a look at that and make sure that all the businesses that they're aware of that are open in our district are being covered?
Clay Curtin has that list, and I'm pretty sure he'd be able to share that with you. Absolutely.
And I guess we also need to cover District 3. So.
Councilmember Mueller, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes. So for me, what I'm looking at is when I went through the San Mateo County ordinance, I noticed that it was only until the end of May, and that they were taking it on term basis. So step by step, presumably in line with what's happening in terms of the shelter in place order, but also in terms of the availability of funding to sort of figure out and stagger what the need is. I'm curious if because we don't have the San Mateo County ordinance, if it also had a May 31st deadline on it.
This is Cara. Yes, yeah. It does have the same May 31st deadline.
Okay, and the reason why I'm assuming, so even if people apply for the grants through SBA or through a grant through San Mateo County Strong or something like that, it's not going to be immediately available to them, and so there's a lag time, basically logistically. And so the question is, from a policy matter, do we want to start off with a pause? And then the other thing that's unclear to me, I didn't see it in this ordinance, but is there a payback provision in these eviction ordinances? Cara, is there something that says you're not off the hook for the funds, you just can't evict at this time?
That's correct. They're modeled after the residential eviction moratorium ordinances, which require that the rental payments be payable 3 months, approximately 3 months after the urgency expires.
Okay, I'd be open to hearing, I'd be open to a staff just to get to the quick of it, I'd be open to a staff report that puts the San Mateo County ordinance on it, this ordinance on it, for consideration of actual adoption. So I know this is more of a, what do you guys want to do? And I'm not ready tonight to commit to doing it completely because it's all going to be in the details of it. But I'm ready to take action to provide temporary relief. I know that. So because even the best aid that we can get to people right now, there will be a delay in them receiving it. So as long as there's a payback provision associated with that, and my guess is if a small business owner sees that that is rising on top of them, they'll probably contact their landlord, that they don't think they're going to be able to pay back. They're going to contact their landlord and try to get out of the lease anyway. So I don't have any problem on as long as we're looking at a temporary basis, similar to San Mateo County and San Mateo County and the city of San Mateo, for a short, limited duration, so that people can problem solve and figure it out. I think that's fine, and then similar to what San Mateo County, similar to what the city of San Mateo did, we could take it up then as we approach near the end of the term and see whether or not it was appropriate to continue it or to do something else separate. But that's where I am on it.
Thank you, Councilmember Mueller. I have a question. How soon does the ordinance go in effect for the county?
The ordinance is an emergency ordinance. It was adopted today and it's effective immediately.
Okay. And was there a reason why it's in effect up until the shelter-in-place order ends? Because it's less than 2 months from now. So.
Well, it does. It goes in. It ends May 31st. And the shelter-in-place order expires May 4th. So is the question, why does it go longer than the shelter-in-place order?
Well, I'm curious just with the time frame of why it's less than 2 months. So I'm just curious.
Right. I think it. You know, it certainly it's. You don't want to deprive property owners of rental revenue for a long period of time, because some of the property owners are also struggling. And so I think that was what the Board of Supervisors and the San Mateo City Council took into account, is that they wanted a short-term stopgap until some of these other federal programs kicked into place. One other thing that we would recommend with, if you do want to explore the urgency ordinance, is to put in a hardship waiver. So in Menlo Park, where there are some small business owners who own a building, but they don't have a lot of additional revenue, that might be an economic hardship for them to go for 3 months without rental revenue. So in that situation, you may want to grant a hardship waiver for them. And so we would recommend putting something like that into an ordinance, which we would bring back to you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nash, did you have another question? Saw your hand raised.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to confirm that a business has, I believe it's this way for the tenant evictions, that they have 180 days to pay back that rent that they are then due. Or do you know what the term is? For what
residential?
Well, residentially, I believe, anyway, actually, yes, yeah. For residential and for the small business, what is the payback duration?
Right. So for residential, it is 180 days. I believe for commercial, it's 90 days, but I'd have to verify that. I think it's a shorter period for commercial. I can research that while we're waiting.
Thank you, Ms. Silver. Vice Mayor Combs, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, so I, in theory, could be supportive of, and I don't know if we're sort of, I pause because I don't know if I should hold until after public comments, because I don't have any questions, but I do have some statements I was going to make. So maybe I'll just pause and we'll see if there's any additional questions, and then I'll save it until after public comment.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Combs. Actually, Ms. Herring, do we have public comment?
Hello, Mayor Taylor. I do see 2 questions in our attendees. If I am able to open their mics when you're ready to call for public comment, I can do that.
Well, I see a list of questions, but I don't see them listed on the side. Is it only our city clerk that can see the questions as they come forward?
That is correct, Council Member Carlton. What happens is that from the organizers' side, we're able to see the attendees who have raised hands and or questions. If we are able to engage their microphone, we will let them use the 3-minute public comment period. If not, I will read what they've typed into the question field.
Wonderful. It's great if we can allow people to speak. Thank you.
Okay, Judy, we'll go ahead and take public comment.
Okay, so at this time, for those of the members of the public who are just joining us, if you have a public comment on this item, which is item H1 regarding, I do apologize. So this is H1, update and consideration of resource small businesses impacted by COVID-19. Please do raise your hand or use the question field. At this time, I would like to call on Pam Jones. And Pam Jones, I'm going to open up your mic. And are you able to?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Wonderful, and we can hear you. So I will go ahead and start the timer and ask for your public comment.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you, council members and staff, for making yourselves available in this mode. I know it's challenging. I wanted to know what outreach and resources are being made to the type of independent contractors, I'm not sure what they call, but the group that would fall into the nannies, the housekeepers, the gardeners, the tutors. Do they know about these programs? And if they are not considered a small business under these guidelines, having a way to help them to qualify, because I know that some of these people may have been working at their, doing this work, maybe 1 or 2 people, say as housekeepers, and may not have followed completely through with being the traditional business, papered business. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, for your public comment. The next public speaker I do see is Roland Kelly. I'm going to unmute your microphone. And Roland Kelly, do you have a public comment on this item?
No, it was just a point of information that the Angelo Mio restaurant has reopened under a new name about 2 weeks ago called Roma and is doing fairly well. Just a comment.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mayor Taylor, I see no more hands raised.
I was just saying, I haven't left my house. I didn't realize they were reopened. Thank you for that information.
Judy, can you repeat what you said? I couldn't hear what you said.
No problem.
I'm sorry.
So
I was just saying that I hadn't. May I? I was just saying I hadn't left my house, and so I hadn't realized it reopened. So I was thanking him for the information.
Okay, Ms. Herron.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. At this time, I have no more public comments received via web form or on the attendees list, and I return the meeting to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Herron. And thank you for the public comment, Ms. Jones and Mr. Kelly. And I have actually a question for Mr. Passman, and it's regarding the survey that was done by, I guess it was Sam Sita. I wanted to find out how long did the survey last? Was it 2 days, a week? How much time were people given to actually respond to the survey?
The data that I presented, it was between March 21st and March 31st.
Okay, that's pretty good. And is the Zone Haven GIS map, is it active now? So is it being promoted?
Yes, Mayor, it is active.
Okay. And then to follow up on one of the public comments with outreach for private instructors, whether it's a piano teacher, a singing teacher, a math teacher, is there any plan or ideas about how to do outreach to small businesses that aren't actually visible to the public?
So that's actually a really good point that Ms. Jones brought up, because the Paycheck Protection Program, independent contractors and individual sole proprietors are eligible for those loans. They would have business licenses in Menlo Park, and that tends to be our best source of contacting these people and finding them. So I think that is something that we will look into.
Okay. And do you think there'll be any actions as far as sending a letter or a flyer or a small postcard to the businesses in the city, just to do broader outreach?
But it's definitely something that we can consider. I'd have to coordinate with Clay on it, but it's definitely something that we're looking at.
And what was your other question? I do support moving forward with the discussion on a moratorium on commercial. And I'm not sure how soon that would happen, but considering that we are already 4 weeks into the shelter in place and it was extended already, concerned about if we wait too long, that it would cause too much of an impact where some businesses would never have the opportunity to start over. So I'm wondering how soon we could actually bring it to our agenda.
So the county model ordinance is available, and if we have a direction to follow that model, it's a fairly simple ordinance to bring back to you. And by the way, I did have a chance to look at both the county ordinance and the city of San Mateo ordinance, and under both ordinances, there's a 6-month period to pay back following the end of the emergency ordinance.
Is that a part of the hardship, or is that something separate?
That would be separate. Yeah.
Okay.
So the hardship would apply to the landlord.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Carlton?
I would support that. I think I'd like to see it come forward. I think it might be passed by the county before it gets back to us. I'm not sure when our next scheduled meeting is. But if that's not the case, I'd like to bring it forward. I think it's a good thing to support.
So for clarification, the county did pass it today. It did go before them.
So in which case, are we going to pass something more stringent, or does that automatically go into effect in Menlo Park?
Good point. So the residential eviction moratorium that the county passed did apply to both incorporated and unincorporated portions of the county. So it applied to Menlo Park. The commercial moratorium only applies to unincorporated county.
Well, then I support bringing it back to us.
Councilmember Nash, and then Vice Mayor Combs.
So I have a comment, but I first wanted to raise a point. Apparently, Kathleen Daly is trying to make a public comment, but was unable to raise her hand and is waiting in the sidelines. So if possible, I would like to hear her public comment and then go back to my comments.
Okay, Ms. Herron?
If Councilmember Nash can repeat the name of the person in queue.
Kathleen Daly. Kathleen Daly, D-A-L-Y.
Kathleen Daly.
She runs
I
Cafe
don't
Zoe.
have. Okay. And I'm just looking at our list of attendees. I don't have that name as an attendee, unfortunately.
Ed?
Thank you. I will reach back out to the person who emailed me and see if we can get that information. Thank you.
And just as
So
a note,
going
we do
forward,
have,
just to clarify, I think. Pardon me?
Judy's waiting for you to make your comment.
So, okay, thank you. So there was, just to clarify, the county was only for unincorporated areas. So I would be in favor of, since this is an urgency ordinance, actually trying to bring it forward even before our next meeting if possible. And I certainly support bringing it forward. Thank you. This is the small business evictions.
Vice Mayor Combs, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and this is somewhat relates to what I think Councilmember Nash was attempting to do in getting the public comment from Kathleen Daly. It's like I'm supportive of this. I would like to see some signal that this is something that small businesses in Menlo Park would see as a benefit to them, and so we're sort of operating a little bit in the dark. I was looking through the county survey, of which I know some Menlo Park, or the Samsita survey, in which I know some Menlo Park businesses participated, and there wasn't a specific question that would you benefit from some sort of eviction prohibition ordinance, and so again, like I can be very supportive, but I will say that we are sort of operating a little bit blindly, and that it's not clear that that there would be benefit. And so if there was some way when we brought this back where we could get some signal, some indication that this is something that is supported by the local business community, I think that would be great.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Combs. Ms. Silver, did you have something you wanted to follow up on?
The only direction that I think would be helpful at this point is what level of small business, how you would define a small business. The county defined it, originally they were looking at 1.5 million, and then they ended up increasing that to $2.5 million in gross revenue. And then City of San Mateo actually took a more expansive view of small business, and you know, they have a $25 million trigger. So those are sort of the bookends.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question for Mr. Passman. Does the chamber support having a moratorium on commercial eviction?
Hi, Mayor. Sorry, I actually don't know. I have not spoken to Fran specifically on that item.
Okay, okay, thank you. Ms. Herron, do you have Ms. Daly available to make public comment? Or someone else?
Yes, it looks like Jen Willison was able to reach her on her phone. However, I did see that Councilmember Mueller has had his hand raised to speak for quite some time. Perhaps we can
Okay.
call on him first.
Okay, definitely. Councilmember Mueller?
Hi. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I would support I'd support it coming back on an urgency ordinance. I'd support it coming back as soon as, so I'd support having a meeting before our next meeting to do it. I'd like to see a May 31st deadline on it. I actually would go with what the county did at the 2.5 million. And I'd like to, and the reason why the May 31st is because I think it's important people understand that this ordinance isn't to stop, basically transfer burden from one party to another, but basically give people the opportunity to get things in line for these other programs. And then later on, if the shelter in place continues and it's apparent that those programs aren't going to be enough, then we can go ahead or not have funding come in enough time, I think we can go ahead and adjust course. But I think it's prudent to do the May 31st deadline on it. I also think it's prudent to have the hardship waiver on it because we're not trying to injure one person to the benefit of another. So, but that's what I'd like to see it come back on urgency and sooner the later, so that if anyone's in that position, they understand that they have the opportunity to still have the time to get their ducks in a row.
Thank you, Councilmember Mueller. Councilmember Nash, you had your hand raised and then it went away, so I wasn't sure.
So I just have Kathleen's question, but if she is on the line, then that's great.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Herron, is she on the line?
Yes, let me try and connect us with Jen Willison, and she will be able to connect us to the public speaker. Give me just one brief moment. Jen, are you able to hear us?
For your own live TV.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're able
Council,
to hear
can you
you.
hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Jen. I'm speaking on behalf of Kathleen Daly. She was having technical difficulties trying to connect with all of you. Her comment involved thinking outside the box, and especially when it comes to food service and the need to be socially distancing, to be outside in the fresh air. So she wanted the planning department or some type of permitting process to be considered to allow restaurants and food services to portion off the parking spots in front of their business to be able to serve food or have music or do other things that typically wouldn't be allowed once the current order is lifted. And there's still some uncertainty to start thinking outside the box in terms of allowing food services to operate more outside. So that was her comment that she wanted me to share.
Thank you, Jen. Councilmember Carlton.
Sorry, can you hear me now? So I completely appreciate where she's coming from, and I want to support all the small businesses. But as I understand it from the county, there's still a restriction on people getting together outside, even at distance from one another. So I absolutely, completely support people having things delivered, being able to pick up through drive-throughs, that kind of thing. But having music that encourages people to congregate together is kind of counter to what we're trying to do in keeping people apart. But I appreciate the idea of where she's coming from.
Vice Mayor Combs?
Yeah, if I understood the comment, I think the idea was after this, obviously the stay-at-home order has expired, and at some point when we're clear that we have at least for the moment are not in the eye of the storm with regards to the spread of COVID-19, that as people become more comfortable with going out and venturing to restaurants and the like, that maybe we should be really sort of innovative in how we think and help small businesses, make people feel more comfortable. If I understood her comment correctly, that like not now, but again, to I think Councilmember Mueller's point, is that we probably have a long road ahead of us, and that we sort of need to be very thinking out of the box in ways we can really help small businesses survive, because this is just in this very moment there's a lot of road ahead.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Combs. Councilmember Nash, your screen freezes, so I'm not sure if you raised your hand for a comment. And your screen is frozen again. Councilmember Mueller, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I did. So actually,
Okay,
I really like.
Sorry,
Okay, I can wait, or should I wait, or should I go?
Councilmember Nash's screen is frozen.
Okay.
So I'll
So
text her.
I can go ahead then, just make my comment real quick. So actually, I really like the Kathleen Daly's idea as it relates to when we trigger and to start to move on to the next phase. And it gets me thinking that actually because what we need to do is figure out how to jumpstart these businesses because when they come back, they're not going to come back immediately. They're going to come back on a phased implementation with social distancing within the business. So you're talking about coming back probably at where they were to begin with at half capacity. And so the idea is, can we put capacity outside of those businesses? So down in Monalto, can we go ahead and create excess seating capacity outside? And if you remember when we were at half capacity and starting to open things up again, that wasn't that much traffic taking place. So is this the opportune time in our downtown area where we're trying to get increased capacity for our restaurants to actually shut down one side of Santa Cruz Avenue or shut down both sides of Santa Cruz Avenue and put increased seating capacity out into the street to go ahead and have people social distanced from each other? But I think it's a wise idea to try to figure out as we phase, and as we start to look at, the county will have triggers to start to move out of the current shelter in place to a more social distanced being again for all of us as it phases down. And we should plan for that now and try to figure out how we're going to go ahead and get those businesses moving again as much as we can.
Uh-oh, I can't hear anything. Are you there?
I'm here.
Oh,
Can
okay.
you hear me?
Yeah, I think I misunderstood. When this is over, when this starts ramping down, I want us to have a citywide party to celebrate all our small businesses. I think that's the time when we have the parade. In New Orleans, they used to have a night when all the restaurants were open late. Can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
In New Orleans, we used to have one night when all the restaurants were open with the art and everyone went place to place. I'd love to see us think of a great celebration with Fran and the Chamber of Commerce on what we can do to really celebrate the small businesses. Can you hear?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry. It's everyone keeps freezing, so I'm not really sure what's happening. I apologize if I seem disjointed. I'm not sure the technology is quite behind us.
Councilmember Nash, and just reach out to you one last time to see if you had a comment.
Fine. Actually, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Are you able to hear me? No. All right. Anyway, okay. Oh, you can hear me? So I was just trying to, okay. I was just going to say yes to what Drew was saying way back when. And so we're past it, it all worked. Thank you. So I agree with everything that's been said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Nash. And I'm really glad that Ms. Daly was able to get her comment in. I think it is important to include our small businesses in the discussion and to have her have an idea about something that we can be doing when it's time to start ramping up our services again. I think it would be great to include small businesses in that discussion. I believe that we have covered both questions from Mr. Passman. I don't know if Mr. Passman is still there. Just making sure that we have given you the direction that you asked for as far as the moratorium on commercial eviction. We'd like to see that come to us sooner than later. And then also the discussion around the outreach to businesses.
Yes, Mayor, I believe so. Although I'll double check with the city attorney to make sure she has everything she needs.
I sure do. Thank you.
And just as a follow-up, Mr. Passman, I just would like to reiterate the outreach to businesses citywide. And if that could be a simple mailer, a flyer, something small with 3 questions on it. Councilmember Nash, did you raise your hand?
I did.
Can't hear you.
I just wanted to find out when we would possibly get this back. I was wondering when we would get this moratorium proposal back.
Ms. Silver, do you have an estimate?
All right. So let's see. Today is Tuesday. I think it can be ready by Thursday if you want us to take a poll for Thursday or Friday to see if you have availability. Is that the time frame you're thinking?
I'm going to wait until Ms. Starla Jerome Robinson speaks.
So we do have a meeting for Tuesday night, and I understand that this is very important and urgent to the council, but just in terms of transparency, I think we should let it be on the agenda for a day or two so that people can be aware of it. So publish on Thursday for a meeting on Tuesday.
Is everyone okay with that? Councilmember Nash? I see a thumbs up by Vice Mayor Combs. Councilmember Nash has a hand.
I was just going to point out that it actually was on the agenda for this as one of the questions for this meeting. So there has been some heads up to people ahead of time. I guess I would defer to what staff thinks as far as, especially Jonathan, what his experience has been with the outreach, if he has any comments. And I don't need to hear now, just generally when we bring it back. But I think sooner is better than later. It is an urgency ordinance.
Councilmember Mueller?
Yeah, because it's an eviction process that would have an amount of time taking place unless no one's raised their attention to us this evening that there's an eviction imminently happening right now. So I have no problem with waiting till Tuesday.
Are there any other questions or comments for staff? Councilmember Nash.
I just request a 1-minute recess so I can try and kick other people in my household off the internet, if possible. Thank you.
Welcome. Ms. Herron, I have a question. And it is, if we take a break, does it, what will appear on the screen? Is it the 1 minute in the countdown, or is it, do we stay visible?
Let me see. It might be best to just have the council all turn off their webcams and their mics. And I can see if I can post something on my screen that says we will be returning shortly.
And,
As a
or,
screen
and this
share.
is mainly, okay, and this is mainly for future reference, because it'll come up again.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to figure out what the best way to handle that.
So yeah, I think for if we are going to take any brief breaks tonight, then the best thing will be to mute all council mics, turn off webcams, and then I will post a notice on the screen saying that we will be returning shortly.
Madam Mayor, may I make one comment before we recess that I think is important to this item? Hello? Madam Mayor, may I make one comment?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So just before we close the item, I just wanted to make the point, and I hope it to the extent that this item is talked about later on. The reason why this eviction moratorium for small businesses until May 31st is so important is that it's actually complementary to the CARES Act and to the other legislation that has taken place, to the extent that what we're trying to do is save businesses from closing and laying off people. So by doing this eviction moratorium, what we're actually doing is complementing the CARES Act and all these other steps that have been taken to go ahead and keep small businesses from closing, because we're buying them enough time when they're being forced with the decision of closing under threat of imminent and possible of eviction, to say you have time to go ahead and take advantage of all of these different resources, and then go ahead and for this 5-week period, 6-week period, pay that back in order to save your business. So this isn't like some radical step that our council's doing. We're actually taking a public policy position that is complementary to all of the other public policy positions that are taking place at both the state, county, and federal level in order to save small businesses presently.
Thank you, Councilmember Menlo. Ms. Robinson?
Oh, I just wanted, if the council, I'm not sure I heard any direction on the definition of a small business that you wanted to give. Was that something you provided direction on, or just some kind of parameters?
I thought it was to stay in line with the county.
Okay.
I think it was Councilmember Nash. Was that what you were going to say?
Well, I actually had an additional comment, but yes, I think that Mayor Mueller originally said to keep it in line with the county, which was the 2.5 million, which I would agree with. My comment was just that I want to acknowledge that there are landlords out there who have I've spoken with who have forgiven rent for 1 month, and I'm sure that some have done more, but that there have been some very good working together with the tenants and the landlords and trying to do as much as they can on both sides, and want to acknowledge our wonderful small businesses and including landlords.
Thank you. Councilmember Carlton?
Thank you. So this is something I won't out the person, but I was actually speaking to someone I know who runs one of the local banking institutions, and talking to him about how this is going to work, because we want to make sure we protect our small businesses, but not every building is owned by the family trust that can take the hit. There might be a building owned by individuals where this is their job, this is their living. And how do we, it goes up the food chain. How do we then make sure that the bank doesn't then repossess the building because they're not getting the rent from someone for X many months as it goes down? So I also want to make sure that we're thoughtful as we're doing this and we're protecting our small businesses, that we're also thoughtful in how we protect maybe the small business in that it owns that building. And I don't know how we do that, but that's another consideration that I've even had with one of the bank owners, and he's looking to the feds for protection on that level. But I just wanted to throw that out there for consideration as we move forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Carlton. Ms. Silver?
Thank you. So I think that's where the hardship waiver comes in. And what that would do is if a landlord can show an economic hardship with respect to delaying the rental payments for a period of time, they could assert that, and the decision maker would require looking at the financial statements and of the landlord, and then could grant a waiver from the ordinance. So we do propose to bring that type of provision back to you in the final ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Silver. So if there aren't any more comments or questions from the council,
Mayor Taylor, we do have comment from Councilmember Mueller.
Oh, Councilmember Mueller. Councilmember Mueller?
Okay, sorry, I was muted, it said by the organizer. So I just wanted to make clear that the original, it doesn't matter, Kara said it now, so it was just a technical difficulty trying to get in. But I had indeed said that I wanted to make sure that it came back with the hardship waiver so that we didn't have the position, the instance that there was a business owner, a landlord who was going to be unduly harmed. So I do support that again.
Thank you. Okay, so now we can move on to our next item, which is a combination of the study session and H2, City Council priorities and status of city operations. To introduce this item will be the Assistant City Manager, Nick Figueros.
Hey, Mayor Taylor, really quick, a question for our city attorney. Do we need to do a motion, second, and a vote for that last item, or was it just direction that was required?
Just direction. Thank you for confirming.
You. Of course.
Thank you.
There we go. Good evening. Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Nick Pigueros. I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I want to kick off this presentation. I believe, can you see the presentation? No. Can I get some help with the technical support here? There we go. Okay. Thank you. And as the mayor mentioned, this is a combination item of two agenda topics. First is the study session that was scheduled to review the city's priorities, as well as the report from departments on our operations during the stay-at-home order. Additionally, in item H2 was intended to discuss more of the EOC operations, as well as any direction the council desires to provide to staff going forward. It made sense upon review that we merged the two items, so I'll just go ahead and kick it off here. Okay. So we'll start with a report from the city attorney, interim city attorney Cara Silver, walking the council through the various emergency orders and how those have impacted our residents as well as our operations. Then we'll move on to the deputy city manager, Justin Murphy, to provide the city council with an overview of EOC operations, or the Emergency Operations Center activation. It'll come back to me and I'll walk through the various priorities. As you and members of the public may recall, we were in the middle of our goal setting and priority setting process when this crisis and local emergency took hold, and we just want to touch base with the council to confirm that we're acting and operating in the manner you so direct. Then we will pass it back to each department head. Will walk very, very quickly, and I'm emphasizing for them very quickly, how their department is focused its efforts over the past several weeks. And then finally, we will close up with Assistant City Attorney, Interim City Attorney Cara Silver to talk about any policy considerations. So with that, I will pass it off to Interim City Attorney. And Cara, if you could just tell me when you'd like to advance slides, I will do that.
Great, thank you. So next slide. Okay, so we have three different categories of orders here that regulate conduct within the city. We have the state's executive orders, we have the county orders, and then we have our own local orders. So with that lens, I wanted to go through the orders and take out the key information that we are currently operating under and the constraints we have. So the first construct is the governor's executive order, and the operative order for our purposes in connection with this staff report is N3320. That was issued on March 19th, and it is known as the stay-at-home order. It requires all individuals living in California to stay at home unless they are exempt. And there are several different exemptions for purposes of this evening's discussion. The two important exceptions are the exceptions for government facilities and operations. So the order allows the city to operate its own government facilities. And then the second exception is that the order, or one of the advisories to the order, later refined the definition of what types of construction activities could occur. And currently, under the executive order, construction is permitted if it falls under a certain category. originally construction was not allowed, but now under the order it is allowed. The second category of operative orders are the series of county orders. The one that we're going to focus on is C19-5B, and that that extended the stay-at-home order, which was issued by the county health officer, to May 4th, and it required people to remain in their premises, but allowed them to engage in essential activities. Essential activities included things like visiting the doctor, purchasing food, working for essential businesses, providing care for family members that were outside of the household unit, attending funerals as long as there are no more than 10 people in attendance. And there was an exception for moving residences, but there were some limitations imposed on that. The county order also very significantly allows each city to identify essential government functions, which would be permitted to continue under the order. And it allowed these functions to be defined by each local city. So we may have a completely different set of regulations within each of the cities in the county. Next slide. Then we have the local regulations. And as you know, on March 11th, the city of Menlo Park adopted its own state of emergency by way of adopting a resolution. It ratified the prior emergency declaration that the Emergency Services Director issued earlier that day. It closed all city facilities and buildings to the public. It canceled all non-essential city events and city public meetings. And it also suspended all non-essential services. And then there was a definition of what essential services were. And again, for purposes of the local regulation, essential services were defined to be police patrol, dispatch, records, water, emergency building inspections, public works, emergency response, public information, and city council support and other supportive internal services that relate to those essential services. Then following the emergency declaration, the city manager issued 3 local orders. The first order halted all construction activity in the city with an exception for public works construction and with a further exception for construction needed to preserve life, health, and safety. The second order closed all additional public recreation facilities, including playgrounds, basketballs, and tennis courts, because we saw that there was large groups of people that were using those facilities that were not complying with social distancing. And then the third order closed Bedwell Bayfront Park for similar reasons. Next slide. So as we start to look at the city's response thus far and the city response going forward, the orders, as we've set out, really set certain principles up for you. And so we wanted to just give you a framework for your future actions. So first of all, the orders are really designed to work together. There aren't many inconsistencies with one another, but if there are certain inconsistencies, in general, the more restrictive order would apply. Also, as I mentioned before, that the city is given broad health and safety power to adopt local orders, and each city is able to determine which of those powers it needs to exercise in its own local jurisdiction, and it can take local considerations into account. And then finally, because we're in an emergency situation, we don't have the typical ordinance procedures take place. So for instance, the commercial eviction ordinance, you directed that come back as an urgency ordinance, and we have the ability to do that. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't dispense with all public process, and so we do want to balance process and make sure that the public is aware of actions that you are taking. But given the emergency, you do have extra power to adopt ordinances on an urgency basis without the first and second reading, and those ordinances go into effect immediately. And likewise, the city manager has the ability, operating as the emergency services director, to issue orders that go into effect immediately. And with that, I believe that Mr. Murphy will present the next series of slides.
Can I ask a question? I just wanted to check in with the council to see if anybody had any questions. Anyone? No. Okay, thank you.
Great. Good evening, Mayor Taylor and City Council. So I'm Justin Murphy, and I will step you through the next few slides. I'll just wait 1 second. I'm not sure if Councilmember Mueller has a question.
Yeah, I did have a question. Thanks, Justin. So my question actually is for Cara, since we had the discussion about the commercial eviction urgency ordinance. It came to my attention, and just doing some research, that yesterday the Judicial Council issued some orders with respect to eviction, and I just don't know if you've had a chance to review those yet or not.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering whether to bring that up tonight or with connection with the next or next Tuesday when you take it up again. But I am familiar. What those orders do is they delay for 90 days the issuance of a summons for unlawful detainer actions. They don't have any impact on the service itself of the notice to terminate based on non-payment of rent. So I think there still is a need to kind of shore up that gap for tenancies.
Fair enough. So that's what I need to know. So while you can't serve it, you can start the process on a tenant.
Exactly, unless the eviction moratorium is in place.
All right, thank you.
Okay, great. So good evening. So my name is Justin Murphy, and I will step you through a few slides related to the city's Emergency Operations Center. So the city attorney outlined the legal framework that we're working under, and I'm going to talk about how we're organized in responding to the emergency. So next slide, please. So this is a organizational chart from the Emergency Operations Guide that was put together for the City Council. So hopefully it looks somewhat familiar. This is something that's customized for Menlo Park for a generalized emergency in Menlo Park. It's not specific to this emergency, but it's in compliance with a number of standards. So it's a lot of this is set up by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, so FEMA. So I'm going to start in on some alphabet soup, so I apologize. And this provides the basic structure. So there's a incident commander, there's various liaisons that report into that incident commander, and then there's 4 basic branches, or they're called sections, each of them with a chief. So starting on the left side in red is operations, planning is in blue, logistics in yellow, and green is finance. So that's the basic organization, and then there are sub-branches within those sections that get populated depending on the specific event. And I have a subsequent slide that shows how we've filled out the roles for this particular incident. So next slide, please. So just going back in time a little bit, as the city attorney a moment ago mentioned that the local emergency was declared on March 11th. And so the next day we officially started the process of activating our EOC. We actually spent the previous days mobilizing and acting in an EOC way, but it was officially activated on the 12th with the main focus of being able to disseminate public information. We then, given this particular emergency and the need for the social distancing, we had to work pretty quickly to set up a virtual emergency operations center. So that was initiated on March 17th. We then, 2 days later, set it out on the incident objectives. I have a couple slides. I'll outline what the current incident objectives are. Started filling out the staffing for the various roles, what our operational periods were. And then this table gives you a snapshot of the various activities that happen throughout a typical day in terms of starting off the day with a section chief's briefing every day at 9 o'clock. There are then a series of calls throughout the day related to our public information officers and also the Joint Information Center throughout the Bay Area at the county level, then the Bay Area public information officers. There's a daily, I think it's now changed to 3 days a week, EOC directors coordination call. And then the city has with more people involved in this, a briefing at the end of the day. So there's pretty structured routine. This is happening Monday through Fridays, but there's also activity that happens at a smaller scale over the weekend. So next slide, please. So this is how we're currently staffed, and we staff on a weekly basis. We have some rotation. Some people have continued on in roles for multiple weeks. So I'm currently serving as the director, and I'm performing that in very close coordination with our city manager slash emergency services director, Starla Jerome Robinson. So at a certain level, I'm just providing her some assistance. Starla is clearly in charge. I'm just trying to help organize some things. So we've got public information officers. We've got 2 people in that role. One is Nicole Acker. She's within our police department, and then Clay Curtin, our public engagement manager in the city manager's office. And then we've got virtual EOC. So similar to what Judy Heron is performing for you right now, we need someone behind the scenes that kind of can help pull all of this off from a technological perspective. Then we've got people focused on operations, and we've got Nikki Nagai, our public works director, and our police chief, Dave Bertini. Both of them have been in those roles pretty consistently for the past few weeks. We then have the planning section chief, and we've got 2 people that have been involved in that role, Nick Shegda from the library and Ronnie Singh also from the library. So neither of those are in the city's planning department. So this is a good example of where the functionality is a reflection of people's skill sets and aren't a direct correlation to the typical operations of the city. Then have a finance chief, and so that's currently filled by Patricia Barboza, and we've had other staff, Dan Jacobson, Kristen Middleton in that role. Then we've got a series of liaisons, and this is one of the things that we really have been spending a lot of time and focus on. So school and nonprofit liaison, Rebecca Lucky, the city's sustainability manager. She's been doing a great job reaching out to the schools. So this is not her typical day job, a special assignment for her, but she's got a great skill set. It's been doing great. Business liaison, John Passman, you heard from him earlier this evening. So this is one where it is aligned with his day job, and that's been working out well. And then a liaison position that we added was related to community crisis management and the CERT, community emergency response team liaison. So Mike Noche, who works in our housing division, has been serving in that liaison role. And then last on this list is Ryan, but not least, is Ryan Zollicoffer. So he's a Menlo Park Fire Protection District employee. He's also under contract with the city to assist us in our emergency preparedness activities. And so Ryan has been instrumental in our training over the past few years, and also on a daily coordination with the fire district. So the city and the fire district are working very closely on this particular emergency. So next slide. So these are the 7 objectives that we've been working under. First and foremost is protecting life and safety of Menlo Park community, and also the city staff that deliver the services. And so that factors into how we've kind of been delivering services and what's safe for people to be able to perform their jobs and comply with the various orders. This becomes the compliance with the orders, and the social distancing becomes a major focus of all of our activities over the past few weeks, and will continue over the next coming weeks. So again, a lot of coordination with other groups, a huge focus on communication, making sure that we are all on the same page, have consistent, accurate information that we're getting out to people. And then on a daily basis, understanding various impacts to operations. And then throughout this, we do need to, there's quite a bit of documentation to comply with the National Incident Management System that FEMA runs, and that provides opportunity for potential reimbursement at some point in time if the opportunity presents itself. And then lastly on this is conducting these essential city meetings, such as the one that's happening tonight, and this has happened in the past and will continue to happen. It's just making sure that we're available to the council and the public. So with that, I think I will be turning the next slides over to Nick Pagueros. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just 1 second. Managing everything on my computer is a little more difficult than I'd like it to be, but I think we're getting through this. Okay. So thank you, Justin and Cara, for those overview, the overview and summary of the legal framework as well as the EOC. What I'd like to now walk the council through is a series of slides that talk about and identify the priorities that are currently facing the organization. It brings the 2 items that we've already talked about together. However, it also acknowledges that the city's operations the city provides services that may not necessarily be directly related to the EOC. So just to get started here, so our current priorities, consistent with the EOC's priorities, is to protect public health. That our primary focus there is to ensure that we're providing public information in coordination with authoritative resources and consistency through among agencies to ensure that we're providing the best information available. Additionally, some more tangible items that the City Council has heard recently is the impact on construction activity and the restrictions there, as well as farmers market modifications. So those are just some examples of actions that the city is taking to protect public health. Additionally, and consistent with the EOC's priorities, protect employee health. So we're doing that. Some examples of how we're doing that: we are providing personal protective equipment and instructing employees to exercise appropriate social distancing when performing their work with both in the office and with public. We are maximizing to the greatest extent possible telework opportunities, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a few slides. And that has definitely been a transition, and our hats go off to our IT folks for helping to mobilize the organization in short notice to adapt to telework. However, not all of our employees are able to work. Some of our frontline service providers in childcare, our teachers, and teachers' aides, their primary work is suspended right now due to closure of our childcare facilities, as well as some other operations in the organization. Another current priority is to maintain our essential public services. The city attorney, interim city attorney, discussed those briefly, and I'll go into a little more depth here. As we maintain, are able to maintain and get into a rhythm with our essential public services, we begin to have the ability to focus on restoring mandated services and baseline public services. And then finally, one of our current priorities is to plan for the financial impacts of this current crisis. So I'm not going to read through these. These are all of the same essential services that the interim city attorney mentioned. What I would like to point out are that the last bullet point there: internal services, payroll, accounts payable, procurement, information technology, fleet and facility maintenance that are critical. Those services are scaled to support the essential services that are in operation. So it's important, clearly, that we continue with all of those functions, but they may not be what folks see or think of as typical emergency essential services. As I mentioned earlier, as we have now gotten into the groove of providing our essential services to the public, we are looking at restoration of mandated and baseline services. And we discussed this with the council earlier this year in an analysis of the various business units that the city has. And just for a refresher, mandated services are those required by federal or state law, or required by local ordinance. If they are an element of local ordinance, the city council may opt to suspend those particular services. So far, we have, in this particular crisis, suspended parking enforcement, and that's something that the council can provide direction on clearly. And we're beginning to see, and will be presenting the council with a request from hotel operators who may be seeking waivers of penalties for collecting and transmitting transient occupancy tax, hotel tax, to the city. So those are items that will come before the council as well. Beyond our mandated services, we have baseline, which was defined as services that are not mandated by law. And they effectively represent the cumulative services that have evolved and developed over time through various city budgets and reflect what the community, some members of the community, take advantage of. The services, the baseline services in several areas are significantly impacted by the stay-at-home order, most notably community services, as I mentioned, childcare, gymnastics. Our libraries are closed, and then some folks in our maintenance division are also affected by this. So moving on to the fiscal impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, I just wanted to provide the council, this is sort of our first opportunity to connect with you and provide our best estimates, our best estimates for revenue impacts that we anticipate. As you can see, it was a partial effect on Q3 of fiscal year 2020. So our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30. So what is the standard business Q1 is our Q3, and our Q4 is the standard business Q2, to make it more confusing. But Q3 which was the middle of March, which includes the middle of March, is really when we started to feel the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis. And as we closed our services and hotels started to close, businesses closed, we began to identify the various revenue impacts that we can anticipate for the balance of this current fiscal year. Again, our fiscal year ends on June 30, and what we're estimating is a cumulative impact of 8.8 million reduction in revenue. On this slide, you also see the $8.8 million revenue loss there. There are a variety of budget savings and changes that we plan to bring back to the council in their second meeting in April. One of the items that the council may be very familiar with is our standard vacancy, our vacancy savings, or savings that result from budgeting personnel at a certain level and then not being able to fill those positions, or having sort of staff turnover in positions. So there is a good amount of vacancy savings that can offset the revenue loss. Additionally, departments are currently working on identifying contract and professional service reductions that could help to offset the budget impact for this current fiscal year. And then the City Council adopted budget contained a contingency of $1.5 million to fund some budget enhancements, and we never quite got around to seeking City Council amendment to the budget to include those. The fiscal year is quickly coming to an end here, and our normal has been disrupted quite a bit. All that said, we estimate that the surplus as of the end of this fiscal, the deficit as of the end of this fiscal year is about $3.8 million. And so we are working on options and for the City Council to consider as we move forward, because we are obligated to maintain a balanced budget. The good news for those watching and for the council is that that this council and prior city councils have taken very prudent fiscal planning measures to establish reserves for this exact sort of scenario, an economic stabilization reserve, which currently has a balance of $14 million. And we have other reserves that the council may choose to access if needed. But that said, we just have never experienced anything like this. If you would have asked me at what point would municipal revenue just be turned off, it's something that wasn't fathomable up until this point. And so definitely extraordinary circumstances, and when we are working on presenting the council with a balanced approach to achieving a balanced budget. So now with that, I am going to hand it off to our department directors to give you a quick sense of what they are working on currently and how their staff is activated, both in response to providing essential services and then in response to restoring mandated and baseline services. And the first up is our Public Works Director, Nikki Nadaya.
Great, thank you, Mr. Figueros, members of the council. As Nick mentioned at the beginning, we will do our best to be brief, so I will go through this relatively quickly. On the earlier slides, both Mr. Murphy and Mr. Figueros talked about the city's support for the virtual EOC. So we have a number of staff who are assisting in that effort right now. And then continuing to provide essential services. So both Ms. Silver and Mr. Figueros talked about the essential services that were defined in the original emergency declaration for the city. So most of these are pretty straightforward. I will just highlight a few things here to give a little bit of color to some of the examples for what types of requests we are providing under these essential services. So first of all, relating to urgent maintenance requests, those are things like when we get calls about tree branches being down, blocking roadways, minor flooding issues. We had a number of those from this weekend's rainstorms that came through. Different things along like water leaks, where we may have ponding water in response to a leaking line. So those are all things where our maintenance workers are mobilized to go out and respond on those on an urgency basis. And we're very lucky to have a really dedicated team of employees who are willing and able to come to work and help us through those issues. So I want to give a shout out to a number of our maintenance workers who are continuing to do service for the city in these really trying times. And a shout out to those who are also staying at home and doing their part to help the spread of the virus. I know they're all struggling with the ability to have to stay home right now when they want to be here helping. A couple other examples are construction for essential infrastructure projects. So I think the council's familiar, but we'll just highlight the two public projects that are actively proceeding right now as essential infrastructure. One is construction of the emergency well at the city's corporation yards. That's a water supply source in case of an emergency. More like an earthquake or something along those lines than a pandemic. But we want to get that water supply in service as quickly as possible. And then the other is construction of a water main along Monte Rosa Avenue. So that started last Monday on March 30th, and that work was proceeding this week to replace that water line. As you know, there's been a history of water main breaks along that line, and so we wanted to get that replaced as quickly as possible. So that's ongoing. And then looking at restoration of critical services, there are a number of high priority projects that we're continuing to work towards. The Bellhaven Community Center and Library is one, as well as a number of other priority projects that were adopted in the council's 2019 work plan. The Transportation Master Plan is one of the high priorities there, as well as the middle crossing. I won't go through all of those in a great amount of detail, but then we're also working to continue to provide our engineering and transportation functions. Most of that work, while in a slightly different capacity, can be done remotely, so those folks are able to connect and do a good portion of their normal job duties just in the remote capacity. And then we're exploring options for continuing to process permits for non-emergency work, even if the work itself can't continue right now, as well as looking to restore some critical ongoing maintenance services where we can ensure that social distancing practices are observed and everybody's safety is in mind. So those are the highlights of Public Works. And with that, I will turn over to Chief Bertini to talk about the police department.
Thank you, Director Nagaya. Madam Mayor, City Council, good evening. Dave Bertini, Police Chief. And as Public Works, the police department is activated to support the virtual EOC. We have numerous members of the police department in positions in the OC, working heavily daily with the Emergency Operations Center. And as I stated in a social media post I did a week ago, I want everybody to understand that we are still on the street responding to priority calls and investigating crimes, making arrests when necessary. Our dispatch center is open 24/7. It is staffed. The 911 center is open 24/7 and continuing to process any kind of emergency call that comes in. We've developed and implemented procedures for officers to minimize risk of exposure, including personal protective equipment that they've been issued, asking that they try to maintain social distancing when possible. Obviously, in our line of work, it's not always possible to do that. We're asking the public to assist us by using our online resources to report low-level crimes, as opposed to calling an officer out to your home. We're also doing a lot of enforcement of the current stay-at-home order. We've created an online method to report violations, and if anybody wants to see that link, if you just go to the city website and go to the police department landing page, it's a link right on that first page. And we're doing a lot of efforts to educate the public as far as the shelter-in-place order. Some people may not realize, but the shelter-in-place order has the force of law. In other words, if you violate it, technically you are committing a crime. It's a misdemeanor crime. And we are handling 30 to 40 calls a day for these violations, but we've developed a 4-step escalation policy on handling repeat violators, where someone will get 2 warnings where we document those in our computer system. A 3rd warning, a police report is actually taken, and a stronger warning is given. And on the 4th violation by the same person or entity, an arrest can be made. But we're trying to minimize, making arrests this time. We're trying to really focus on educating and garnering compliance voluntarily from the public. We're also conducting numerous checks of essential open businesses. You'll see police officers walk around grocery stores, pharmacies, downtown, and making sure that everything is in order and that folks are educated as to what the shelter-in-place order has in it. And I also want to just thank the men and women of the police department who are coming to work every single day, putting themselves at risk to serve this community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our library director, Sean Reinhardt.
Thanks, Chief. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's really wonderful to see you again. Over at the library, we've been keeping busy providing some support to the Emergency Operations Center, as Deputy City Manager Murphy mentioned earlier. We've been utilizing our pre-existing electronic services as well as adding new electronic services to keep up with the demand for ebooks, streaming video, interactive online tutoring, and literacy support. In fact, just the past week, we've had 200 new library card applications come in online for people who want to access those resources. We're also developing some virtual story times, virtual book discussion groups, and some other library programs that can be handled through technology such as this we're using right now. We've also been working on some creative solutions to get printed books to homebound residents through the U.S. mail, and also by activating our rather extensive community network of little free libraries. We're really lucky to have those folks out there with little libraries in front of their house. Also, library team members are working remotely using this opportunity to implement department-wide cross-training efforts, completing projects or assisting with projects like the Bellhaven Community Center and Library, of course, and implementing procedural updates, all of which we'd had laid out in our strategic plans. So now we have some time to do those things, even though the circumstances really aren't what we would have chosen. So that's just a quick summary of the things we've been working on here in the library. And I think next up is our Community Services Director, Derek Schwagert.
Oh, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. It's nice to see all of you again. So Derek Schwagert, Community Services Director, just going to give you a quick review of what's happening with community services. So community services has been supporting the logistics section of the EOC, which is primarily responsible for supplies, procurement, and so forth, which is included supporting public works with facility closures, also providing supplies for PPEs for our essential workers, and identifying key personnel to support the EOC. So that's one of our roles during this crisis. The other focus has really been serving our vulnerable populations in the community. We worked really hard to mobilize quickly so that we could provide some support to our seniors, providing home delivered meals to approximately 40 of our Menlo Park Senior Center seniors who have been identified with special needs, illnesses, lack of family support, lack of mobility, or just no means of transportation. So we're currently doing that, providing that 3 times a week, doubling meals to our families, to our seniors. We also have received some grocery produce bag donations from Facebook, which also supplement the meals that we're providing. We also conduct the biweekly Senior Brown Bag program, which is our food pantry program that we do with the seniors. We're currently serving roughly about 100 or so currently right now with that. 42 of those go to homebound seniors, and around 60 of them are curbside pickups for our seniors. One of the important things that we do with our seniors is our wellness checks. So we're conducting roughly around 100 wellness checks per week, and those have been going really well. We're also looking at expanding those further. One program we're launching this week is a program called Project Cheer. This is being rolled out. Basically, it's letters that are going to the senior center from staff, volunteers, and other seniors, just letting the seniors know that, you know, we haven't forgotten them through this crisis, give them that moral support and so forth as we're all trying to get through this together. So those are some of the things that we're working on currently with the seniors. Two things that we are looking at and we're monitoring right now is the need to expand our wellness checks. And so we are looking at expanding wellness checks citywide, not just to the seniors that we provide. We do know that Little House currently is providing wellness checks for their seniors in their senior center, but we also understand that there are others with special needs that may be also experiencing food insecurity. So we want to expand that out elsewhere, and also really monitoring the need for additional meals, potentially curbside meals for other folks out there that also have food insecurity. So that's the main focus we've been doing to support this overall operation. In terms of baseline services, we are transitioning. We just launched, the community services just launched our virtual recreation center. And with that, there's a number of components with that. It includes a number of activities, resources that have been curated by city staff, and that we plan to add content regularly. Just some of the highlights in that included Well Connect, which is a senior center without walls program where seniors can call in and actually participate in various classes over the phone. So something that seniors can have access to if they don't have technology. We're also going to be ramping up our daily preschool lessons and number of recreation offerings as well. So we're looking at supporting distant learning similar to what the school districts are doing with schools, but we want to do that with our preschools as well. Building community for providing ways. One of the things that we want to do is have community share ideas with one another. This could be done with the form of virtual events that we might conduct as part of our virtual rec center. So contests, challenges, talent contests, that kind of thing that we can be doing online. And then just lastly, we have a number of staff that are working remotely. Some of them are also working on preparing for transitional services in Bellahaven, as well as working on the Bellahaven Community Center and Library project. We're currently doing program needs assessment and evaluation for our various programs, because now we have the time we can do that. We're also looking at our curriculum and lesson planning for all of our childcare programs, and we're currently working on that as well. The other one I just want to point out is our recreation management software. We had this as part of the IT master plan. So this is a great time for us to really focus in on that project, which would require normally a lot of time to devote to that. And then just getting ready for recovery and reopening plan. So that's a summary of what we're doing with community services. And now I'd like to turn it over to Deanna Chow, our Interim Community Development Director. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Taylor and members of the City Council. I'm Deanna Chow, the Interim Community Development Director. So for community development, I'd like just to highlight 4 key areas that we've been working on during this shelter-in-place area. So I think much of our work that we do in community development has aligned well with some of the services that you've seen recently. So we've been supporting community needs that may have been affected through COVID-19. So a couple of weeks ago, last week, the City Council adopted modifications to the rental assistance program, and will continue to bring back potentially some additional considerations for the City Council at either the next meeting or the following meeting. This evening, there was a very robust conversation about how do we help our small businesses. So similar to how do we support our residences, how do we also support our businesses and needs? And so we'll be coming back with you next week with an urgency ordinance related to eviction moratoriums. And then as many of the other departments, we're also here to help serve in the virtual EOC. So we've had, as Justin mentioned earlier, our staff support the business liaison role. We had our staff support in the CERT liaison role. And then Donna Kaufman also has been a key part of our logistics efforts. With respect to one of our essential services, responding to emergency construction requests. So as you know, construction has been halted for the most part here in the city. There are circumstances or instances where construction for emergency reasons have been requested due to potential life or safety issues. These requests range from landscaping to leaking roofs to concrete pours. We've probably received approximately, as of yesterday, 35 or so requests for emergency construction and inspections. Probably a little less than a third we've probably approved for emergency construction. And again, these are for things just to get them buttoned up, to make them safe, to get them to a certain phase where there is, again, safe and health reasons, but not to complete the full construction. So it's an opportunity to make sure that there's safe measures in place. The next item, so we're really excited. So we've been able to continue to do at-home work and implement new protocols and technology to reinstate key land development functions. So last week, so during the shelter in place, much of our staff has been able to continue to work from home, either via email, via phone conversations, but we've had to revamp some of our procedures in order to do our planning and building permit review or plan check process. So we have been primarily a hard copy plan department. We are transitioning to digital plan review through our new land management system, so Acela, which was a priority of our council. So we did launch that last fall, and we're continuing to add capabilities to make it more robust, not only for staff, but for members of the public to be able to access that information. So we were able to start taking in new planning development applications, as well as accept resubmittal of current but not yet issued building permits. And so that could be done through online submittals of Acela. And then on the same vein, we are continuing to identify and initiate additional opportunities to reinstate and enhance available resources to the public. So if and when there's interest to do construction, we are exploring virtual building inspections. That could be done through Acela. We are continuing to do, how do we do full new applications of building permit applications online? We're always looking for opportunities to update our webpage to provide additional resources for members of the public, whether it's the new ADU laws or more details about our green and sustainable building regulations. We're looking to expand that. And then certainly during this period, as we all learn how to do new technologies and webinars, there's also opportunities for other further staff development in areas of their professional interest of certifications. Particularly, I know some of our building inspectors are taking that opportunity as well. So that concludes for community development. And with that, I'll hand it over to Nick Figueros, who will be reviewing admin services. Thank you.
Okay. So as the council is aware, our administrative services director, Lenka Diaz, accepted a promotional opportunity, and last week was her last day. Last Thursday was her last day with us, or Wednesday. And in the interim, administrative services will be reporting to me. So just very quickly, the three divisions in administrative services, we have information technology. This team has gone above and beyond to provide the resources that our organization and that our staff needs to make the best use of their time. And during the stay-at-home order, we've deployed all of our available city-owned laptops and smart devices to help facilitate that. Before the COVID-19 emergency really started to take hold, our team had the foresight to place an order for 50 new computers, and those have been delayed consistently. So right now we do not have computers to expand to folks in the organization, but hopefully we will receive those resources soon. Clearly, supporting the equipment and application challenges and problems that folks have is a little more complicated when we can't just go over to their desktop, and the team has done a great job of taking more remote troubleshooting protocols to help folks. And then finally, the team is really looking at opportunities to enhance our current technologies as well as perhaps replacing some of our older technologies. Our human resources team, again, significantly impacted by the COVID-19 emergency. The federal government passed a number of new benefits to help ease the impact of this crisis on the nation. And while many of those benefits provided expansion and protections for employees who didn't have benefits, the city is also subject to those as well. And we are working through trying to make a sense with the employees of the vegetable soup that is the federal legislation. As the council is aware, we are meeting and conferring with our labor units regarding this emergency, and our HR team is also working to develop telework options for staff who may not have frontline or firsthand duties to perform remotely. So for like our childcare teachers and some of our other staff who are unable to work because we don't have work, we are identifying telework options for them to continue during the stay-at-home order. And then finally, our finance staff continues to implement the OpenGov budget software. That project was approved last year before the crisis, and we were on schedule to issue the budget this year in the OpenGov platform. As mentioned earlier, some of the financial information that we're now faced with is sort of changing up our budget process. And again, we will be coming to council with a discussion of how that all gets affected. Fortunately, we moved to electronic time cards about a year or so ago, and our payroll process is, for the most part, fully operational to be done remotely, which seems like a rather small win, but it's a significant win for the organization. I want to congratulate the finance team for that. And then finally, one of our most rigid paper processes in the organization that I would say is how we process vendor payments. We have a number of internal controls in place to prevent and protect against fraud, whether it be bad actors outside the organization or potentially someone trying to do some harm within the organization. We have a number of checks and balances in place, relies heavily on paper, and so we are in the process of transferring to electronic vendor payments using the automated check clearinghouse or something along those lines, ACH. With that, I will pass it off to City Manager Jerome Robinson to review the City Manager's office.
Thank you, Mr. Figueres. So for the City Manager's office, we've been focusing on supporting the virtual EOC and the City Council support, which I think you all are painfully aware. We've had 4 emergency meetings and 4 special meetings, and we do have a commissioner recruitment going on. We've also continued to support the Bellhaven Community Center and Library process, and then the sorting and scanning of mail. And I think perhaps we need to also emphasize the communication work that has been done throughout our office, both for the virtual EOC and just the general communication. So that's a quick summary. And I will pass it off to, let's see, I think Kara's going to go next. Do you have that right?
I will just very quickly here recap the policy considerations before the council. So we're looking for confirmation of the local emergency or the current priorities that I outlined earlier. Just to recap, priority to protect public health, employee health, maintain our essential public services, restore public services. This is doing this. Plan for the financial impacts of the crisis, and then once those factors are all sort of tied up, really also balancing several city council priority projects that we understand to have that are currently underway. First and foremost being the Belhaven Community Center and Library, and then several other projects listed there. So we are seeking city council confirmation of these priorities. And then I believe the city attorney has one slide for additional considerations. So I'll pass it off to city attorney.
So now that the local emergency is almost a month old, we thought that we should check in with you and with the public at this juncture and just confirm that all of the orders that we have issued in this interim period should continue, or whether they should be modified, or whether you would like us to pursue other orders. And one of the issues that has come up is the construction order. And as I mentioned previously, the county order allows for construction activities to occur in order to incentivize housing projects. And so they have a carve out now for housing projects that include at least 10% affordable housing component. So that's one area where you may want to reconsider your existing orders. Also, we've had questions about how to utilize volunteers, and there are so many different volunteer opportunities out there. There are a lot of very engaged residents in this community, and so you may want to give us some guidance on how to provide work or collaborate with volunteers at this point as well. And with that, I think we will turn it back to you for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the presentation. Are there any follow-up questions from the council before we take public comment? Okay. Ms. Herring, Councilmember Nash.
I'm curious, what is the status of our hotels? Like, I know that several have, anyway, I would love to hear from staff how our hotels are doing.
To the best of my knowledge, right now we have one of our larger hotels, the Rosewood, that is fully closed and non-operational. The other larger hotels, I do not have that information available right now. However, we are hearing from neighboring jurisdictions that occupancy rates are below 20% in some cases. And the other consideration that I might point to is that during this stay-at-home order, shelter-in-place order, it's not uncommon for individuals to take longer-term residencies at hotels. Perhaps not some of the more expensive hotels, but that does happen. And when a stay exceeds 30 days, it's no longer subject to our tax. And so we may be seeing that as well.
I've heard that the Hotel St. James is also has closed.
they sent me an email, and I'm not sure if it was forwarded to the council, but it will be. Are there any other follow-up questions for staff? Ms. Herring, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. We did receive 3 public comments via the web form. However, I do see 2 of the commenters on our attendees list. So if you'd like, I can ask if they'd like to speak now or if they'd like me to read their previously submitted public comment.
Okay.
So the first public comment would be from Lynn Bramlett. Lynn, I'm going to unmute your microphone. Please let me know if you'd like to make a public comment now, or if you'd just like me to read the public comment that you have submitted previously via the web form. You're officially unmuted.
Hello, Council and Judy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear? Okay. Well, no, I thank you, but no, I don't want you to read what I wrote. Let me just say at a high level, your city policies lay the foundation for the use of volunteers, your safety element, municipal code, the emergency operations. And once this is behind us, the organization I'm with, you know, I'm speaking for myself tonight, but I know it certainly supports these goals. We'd like to be better integrated into the emergency operations plan. So city policy lays the foundation for volunteers, and then the MPC Ready group, during a major disaster, help normally isn't there. And right now we're focused on providing block coordination coverage throughout Menlo Park and the adjacent county areas. And Mike Noche has been great in terms of working with him. We'd like to have a closer relationship with the EOC. Our main focus in terms of sharing information is we have mutual goals, if you will, toward protecting life in Menlo Park, helping people to get educated, and we'd like to work more closely toward that. And then I had some specific suggestions in the emails that I wrote you. And one of them is that the police department, for example, focuses only on essential activities. And I named a few things where we would have liked their help, but they couldn't do it. But anyway, we want to work with you. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, for your public comment. The next public comment I have is from Rebecca Grant. Again, this was submitted via web form, but I do see her on our attendees list. I'm going to open up Rebecca's mic and ask if she would like to make her public comment now, or if she'd prefer I read her public comment from earlier submission. Rebecca, I have unmuted your mic. Would you prefer to give your public comment?
Council. Please feel free to read my email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, so this time I'm going to open up Rebecca's public comment. Looks like you guys are seeing it on the screen. And again, I will be reading it just so there is clarity on what is on the screen. And again, this is from a Menlo Park resident, Rebecca Grant. To City Council, I am writing as a resident of Menlo Park to express my support for the effort to organize, train, and utilize volunteer networks in our city. There are hundreds of volunteers already working behind the scenes with no official stamp of approval from the city to connect with thousands of residents. For anyone lucky enough to live in one of these connected communities, people know their neighbors, folks look out for others on their block that might be in need of support, and the community as a whole is prepared to take direction or communicate up as needed if an emergency or disaster comes their way. Don't we want our entire city to be like this? Please support the efforts to strengthen and connect our communities via block preparedness coordinators at the grassroots level. In the long term, this work will make a huge positive difference for our residents. In the short term, it may save lives. Sincerely, Rebecca. And then I do have one more public comment that was received via web form. And as I'm reading this comment, if there's anyone who is currently in our attendees who would like to speak on this item, please use the little hand icon to let us know that you would like to speak on this item, or you can type in the question mark forum and we can read your comment to the City Council aloud. Going to queue up the next public comment. Hopefully you can all see this is a public comment received from Menlo Park resident Peter Carpenter. Public comment is as follows. City Council, please follow the wise leadership being provided by the town of Atherton and the city of Palo Alto. 1, fully activate your emergency operations center. 2, accept responsibility for the hundreds of CERTs already trained at no expense to the city by our fire district and the hundreds more Menlo Park residents who have joined with them to attempt to complete a citizen-led effort to provide city-wide coverage for every resident. 3, contribute to the recruitment of more block and area coordinators by both strongly endorsing this effort and financially supporting it. 4, immediately integrate that rapid growing network of area and block coordinators into your EOC by giving them a chain of command headed by a senior manager who has significant incident response system training and experience and who respects the value of these volunteers. At this time, I'll call for one more public comment period for those of you on our attendee list. Please use the hand icon and we can open your mic, or use the question mark icon for typing in your public comment. Give it a couple more seconds. Seeing none, I turn the meeting back over to the mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Herron, and thank you for the public comments. Are there any questions from council? I know that was a pretty extensive presentation. Councilmember Nash.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was very extensive and very informative. I'm wondering if we can get a readout of how, I guess, 2 comments. One, the police data on shelter-in-place violations, and I heard, I believe there were 30 to 40 violations. I'm wondering how those are being handled. And I guess previously I'd heard that there was a 3-step process to deal with these violations. Now it sounds like there's a 4-step. I have been receiving a lot of comments that we actually need a shorter process because people are very concerned about violations. And I just would like to hear Chief Bertini comment on his experience with the violations, how they're being, if we really are seeing people violate multiple times, and what his suggestion is for dealing with that. And then in addition, I've had some concerns and people reaching out about domestic violence, about child abuse, and about hate crimes. And I'm curious, again, what Chief Bertini's comments are, how those are being handled, and what more we can do to deal with those situations in this time. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, would you like me to respond to that?
Yes, please, Chief Bertini.
Certainly. So as far as the orders violations that we're getting a 30 to 40 a day is on average, and most of those are, you know, gardeners, construction, kids playing together, things of those nature. The 4 steps that we made into our policy was in conjunction with the district attorney's office. The district attorney's office sent out to all the police agencies in the county what their expectations are. The DA has said that they will prosecute, but they wanted us to have an escalation process. So we put an escalation process into place. We are not getting a great deal of repeat ones that are getting more than one or two educational periods and or warnings. So we're not getting the same people doing the same thing over and over again. But again, we do have the power to arrest somebody if it gets to that fourth violation, and they've constantly been told to follow the orders, and if they don't after that fourth violation, they can be arrested. Now that's going to be a last resort. We'd rather not do that, but that is an option, and we can do that. We haven't gotten to that point yet with anybody. As far as your other question about domestic violence and things of that nature, interestingly enough, I did have our folks run the stats. March of 2019 and March of 2020, we actually had one less domestic this year than we had last year. So at least in March, we have not seen an increase. Are we seeing more verbal arguments? Anecdotally, I'd say probably, but I would wait until the end of the month of April to see whether there is a major increase in domestics. As far as reporting crimes, we're handling any kind of crime, whether it's a hate crime, a domestic, child abuse. We're handling them the same way as we always would. We take reports, we do investigations, and we make arrests when appropriate. So the way we're handling criminal complaints has not changed at all. And as far as what we could do to help people, the same resources that have always been out there for anybody who's suffering domestic violence or who wants to report child abuse are still there. The phone numbers, the resources, they're all still active, and they're still being used. And the way we process those situations have not changed.
Thank you, Chief Bertini. Councilmember Nash, did you have a follow-up question for the chief?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you so much for the information. I guess a couple follow-up. One is there's anyone who's been on Nextdoor has probably noticed there's quite a bit of concern on both sides about about the violations and how they're handled. And it's creating quite a bit of just rhetoric on Nextdoor and quite a bit of concern. I've had one of the Nextdoor moderators regularly reaching out to me and very concerned about what we can do about it. So any suggestions would be helpful. In a prior email, you had said that there were 3 escalations. Now it sounds like there are 4. Whatever we can do to cap this early would be great. I'd love to know the numbers that you're seeing of domestic violence, of child abuse, and of the hate crimes in this, not relative to last year, but just how are we doing on those? Obviously, I'm sure we would all agree that, one is too many. But so how are we doing on these? Especially on the hate crimes, have you been seeing hate crimes? I am hearing them reported.
As far as the escalation, the message from the police department has not changed. It's always been 3 then arrest. So maybe there's some misunderstanding of how many. Yeah. So it's the same thing we've been doing since day one. Now it's formalized. It's a formal policy that I've created for our police department in conjunction with what the district attorney has asked us to do in order to prosecute these successfully. As far as child abuse, hate crimes, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm aware of one hate crime specifically during this period. But besides that, I have not seen any others reported at this point, but I would have to go back and have all those statistics run.
Is it, how do people report these crimes at this point? I know there's probably a regular system. Very honestly, I've not looked into that before. What is the best way to do this?
Of any crime?
Well, I'm specifically thinking of domestic violence, child abuse, and hate crimes.
So it's the same way we'd always either, if it's going on and there's danger to life, you call 911, or you call the police department non-emergency number, or you could even come to the police department. Our front doors are locked, but there's an intercom. You talk to the dispatcher. So the same ways that have always been available to report crimes are still there. There is no change. There is no break in any of that kind of ability to report any crime.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Bertini. Councilmember Mueller. Councilmember Mueller. Okay. Councilmember Carlson.
Hello? Yeah, hello. Sorry, it took a while for the thing to recognize I was there. So yeah, I have a couple comments. So the first would be, I think that with respect to the volunteers, you know, it's frustrating right now because they're sort of in a limbo. The fire department isn't activating them, and the city's not activating them. And the worst thing that can happen in this circumstance is that there is no chain of command for them. And so, because the chain of command both ensures resident safety, but also puts into effect discipline. So a reporting with the city and interacting and training. And I know that the folks who are doing it now are just, you know, are working real hard to grab every piece of training material they can and organize the way they can, but they need a proper chain of command. And the reason why that this is going to matter beyond just, you know, the things that people are trying to do with their neighbors right now, is that when we move from a strict shelter in place to try to draw down from this to a time where we're doing tracing, depending upon how fast we move to that, you may need volunteers who are trained in that. And right now in the UK, in the United Kingdom, they're training thousands of volunteers how to do training in that country. They have some subset of our volunteers who will be trained and be trained well enough to do that here. And so, but then secondarily, we just need a chain of command so people know what they should be doing and reporting back into the city. If this were to, imagine a scenario where, because right now looks like we're nearing a peak, and what everyone needs to understand about a peak is that doesn't mean that the event's over. That means that the flames are down and the embers are still hot. But so flames are down, but embers are still hot. And so the county may decide that it wants to release, and we might release and then all of a sudden have big flames again. And so this is going to go on back and forth until we have a medical intervention or a vaccine. So what we really, even if the shelter in place has been effective at this moment, we really need to take advantage of the time that we have to get people trained and get an established chain of command. And we owe it to these folks for someone to take responsibility for them. So that's my thought where it comes with the volunteers. The other issue I wanted to touch on was the affordable housing construction component. So my big concern on that right now still is the lack of PPE, that we are still in a PPE crisis. But what we're hearing from the county is that we may not be in a PPE crisis in about a week and a half from now. And so if we reach a point where we're not in a PPE crisis in a week and a half from now, and we are talking about one construction site or two construction sites that city staff should be able to monitor to make sure that people are in fact adhering to safety protocols so that there isn't vector spread. From a public policy standpoint, if the council says, for affordable housing projects at a specific threshold, we can let those go under some strict guidelines, then I'm open to listening to that because of the dire crisis that we're in when it comes to affordable housing. Because if we can be assured of the fact that there are precautions being taken place on site from the monitoring, since there aren't very many sites in the city doing anything right now, and also assured of the fact that we're not putting healthcare providers in harm's way because there's PPE available again, And that's something that I can potentially look at and support. And so I share that with my colleagues because as you guys know, I very much believe in the actions we've taken to date, but this crisis will continue to change week to week. And so if that PPE becomes available and we're talking about very limited number of sites, then that's something that I could see us balancing on. With that, I'll go ahead and pass to my colleagues.
Thank you, Councilmember Mueller. Councilmember Carlton.
I agree with what Councilmember Mueller just said. I also want to touch on something else that I think Councilmember Nash touched on briefly, but not too long ago, a few days ago, I had to take my dog to the emergency vet clinic in Redwood City. And in driving down through Redwood City, I was shocked at how many really large gardening crews I saw in Menlo Park. And it made me realize, you know, as we read these things on Nextdoor, and unfortunately, painfully, the way Nextdoor works, I only get to see Nextdoor in my little neighborhood. I don't get to see Nextdoor across the whole city, which I'm not sure a lot of people realize. But at least in our area of Nextdoor, people are like, well, I'm not having my maid, I'm not having my nanny, I'm not having my gardener. Why are these other people having theirs? And I understand the kind of angst that they feel when they get online, and they want to feel that the police are backing them up. And I get a lot of phone calls and emails, as I'm sure my colleagues do, about groups of students hanging out in the park together, or groups of kids getting together and riding their bike and playing together. And there's, I'd like to think it's not people being malicious as much as it's people really not understanding the importance of why we're sheltering and keeping that arc down to be able to keep the people who need to go into ICU below our level of what our emergency medical workers can handle. And so I would love it if the city could put, because the city is the only one that can put things out to Nextdoor across the city. And maybe we need to put something out being a little bit more explanatory on exactly why we're doing this, and that it does mean you. It does mean your gardener, and it does mean your kids playing in the street or hanging out. And we're not closing the parks because we don't like parks. We're closing the parks because we want to save people's lives. And this really does get down to trying to save lives. And maybe we need to do a little bit better job of maybe being less gentle and more explicit in explaining to people that's why we're making these rules, and that's why these rules need to be followed. Because nobody likes having to call the police. Whether the police are going to prosecute or educate, no one likes being that person. And so it would be great, and I'll follow up with our city manager on possibly how we can send out more direct and clear explanation and details on what is expected, so that people might follow those more directly. And there are people who are literally on Nextdoor saying, I'll share my gardener's number with you offline so that you're not busted. And there are those. But I think most people just don't understand and maybe need a more direct explanation. And I want to thank the police for all the great work that they're doing. It's interesting that you get lambasted if you're too harsh, and you get lambasted if you're not harsh enough. And so thank you very much for everything you're doing. We got an email earlier about, and I, as a parent of 2 young kids myself, I hear about the frustration of people not only having to try and video conference into work while their kids are running around in the background, which we've done ourselves as city council members, but also the frustration of dealing with birthday parties and these other things that are graduation, that are so critical in the social lives of our children. And I heard about a police car that came by and did their horn and waved. And we appreciate you being creative and trying to support people in staying in place and not having birthday parties. And we appreciate you being creative and all that you do to keep us safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Carlton. Vice Mayor Combs?
Yeah, I'll just sort of respond, go down the list and respond to a couple of things. First, I'd like to say I think the city's overall response has been commendable. I know the staff has been working under very challenging circumstances, and I think whether it's the communication in the parks, whether it's the speed at which we have been able to sort of close down facilities and make decisions, really to have to really make this sort of social distancing effort impactful, again, like I say, has been commendable. I do think, and this I think speaks to some of the comments we've heard earlier about threads on Nextdoor, and I don't think that we should be in the business of necessarily always trying to respond to threads on Nextdoor, because that could be a losing battle. But I would like to see something on the level of a kind of a virtual community town hall, maybe something led by the city manager and the mayor, where people really get this opportunity to engage with city leadership and ask questions, whether it's about the construction moratorium or other things. And I really do think that, again, like, I think our communication has been great. I think the emails have been incredibly detailed. But I do think that probably looking into another avenue, another platform in which we get to, or the city can engage with residents directly and answer their questions real time, could have enormous value. The other thing regarding this, the local construction prohibition, I would be willing to, look at that, reconsider that at some point in the future, if it's a couple of weeks out, and really sort of, if we're dealing with a different situation. I would be concerned that, again, I wouldn't want to be in a situation of sort of picking winners and losers as far as which projects could restart and which projects could not, unless we really had it clear what sort of what we were using to make that determination, if it couldn't be something more broad, if it was going to be very, very limited. Again, like I say, I would be concerned about us choosing winners and losers, or those who could proceed with their projects and those who could not. So that would be something I would be really concerned about. The other issue came up was the volunteers. Again, I would want to hear from staff about like what that looks like, right? What it looks like really sort of providing that command structure that some of these volunteer efforts are looking for. I know, again, a lot of this was spun up not with the city being directly involved. And so I would be concerned of what challenges might arise if at this point the city attempted to be directly involved and attempted to provide that command structure. Would it be something that would be embraced overall by all of those volunteers, or would it be something of which, again, where the city would be inserting itself into some disputes or disagreements regarding sort of the different volunteer efforts? And so again, like I say, overall, I'd be in favor of exploring it. I want to hear from staff like how that would look and what their concerns might be. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Combs. Councilmember Nash.
Thank you. So going to the priorities for the city, I would love to get an update as to what is going on with the Belhaven Community Center and Library, and what is the status of that project? How is it, and just what is happening with that given our current situation. I believe that we should be looking at all of our CIP projects and all of our expenditures at this point and carefully deciding what needs to happen now, what can be deferred. I I recently saw an update for the RFP for the hydration stations. That's something I think could be deferred. I'd like to see some of these coming back to council and discussing the CIP projects generally in light of this new crisis and our new financial situation. So I'm not sure when that can happen, but I do strongly agree with going ahead with Monte Rosa water main replacement and the emergency water supply, because I think that's for the health and safety of our residents and businesses. And I wish it had been done earlier by other councils. And I think at this point we need to get it done. Thank you.
So if I may just respond to Councilmember Nash's question about Bellhaven Community Center and Library. We will have an informational item on the agenda for the 14th, next Tuesday, and then an action item on the 21st, so 2 weeks from today. And the CIP will be coming back to you as part of the overall budget strategy.
Councilmember Nash, did you have another question?
Well, I just had a comment, and that's I'd like to know what the status is as far as just spending generally. For example, I was running through down Santa Cruz Avenue today, passed by North Lemon, and realized we've got $40,000 outstanding for some pillars there for as part of the street calming that had been deferred. I'm just wondering if we can get a status at some point from staff on a number of these projects where we did have outstanding items, and how and what are the decisions being made, and how can council weigh in on them for even some of the smaller amounts, which in this current situation I think will add up and is worth looking at. So for example, just as example, this $40,000 project to get the monuments to slow traffic and that sort of item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Nash. I'm not sure who to ask this question of on staff, but I wanted to follow up on Vice Mayor Combs' question about the volunteers and the staff's recommendation, what it could look like if we did support the efforts of the volunteers.
Well, I mean, I guess sorry. So I don't want to speak for Councilmember Combs, so he can correct me, but I don't think it was how we can support the volunteers. I think it's how the volunteers can help support the EOC or city operations.
Well,
and that's a very different formula.
Well, so then the opposite, the different formula. So how can the volunteers support the efforts of the city? And what would that look like for staff? So I just wanted to see if you could answer his question.
So, right, and so I guess, again, I'll defer to Councilmember Combs. What I heard him say was come back with, go give it thought and come up with a plan. I don't have a quick answer to that off the top of my head.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I will start off with the volunteers. I heard so much, I'm not even sure where to begin, and I'm grateful that no one can see what's around me. I had to, with these items on the agenda, I had to go back and look at what we were doing a few months ago. And so I looked at our CCIN, and this is a very short email from Mr. Jim Lewis. Honorable Mayor and council members, in preparation for the annual City Council goal setting meeting, I reviewed the letters to the CCIN website. One topic that jumped out at me was the topic of public safety, and more specifically for the need of 1, an emergency operations center, and the need of 2, a disaster preparedness community safe plan. Similar letters were sent by Lynn Bramlett, Tom Prushing, attaching a letter signed by 16 Menlo Park area residents. The letter stated in part, "We ask that you and your fellow council members make emergency preparedness a priority at your annual goal setting meeting." And this group is also working to establish a Menlo Park CERT program, and CERT stands for, of course, Community Emergency Response Team. The reason why I bring that up is because I do feel that there needs to be something more robust that ties the 200 plus volunteers in place already that can help support the efforts of the city. The challenges, that I'm hearing is that the community members do not know who the volunteers are. Everybody doesn't know everybody. And so how do you establish a level of trust in a time of a crisis? And that's the challenge that the volunteers will have with trying to go door to door. I'm concerned that we have a group of volunteers that are doing things that we haven't been able to do as a city. And so how do we pull all of us together and try to move forward? This was an idea before the emergency, the pandemic arrived in our world. And so how do we use this experience that we're in now to move forward with a group of volunteers? And so I'm in support of doing something. So I appreciate Councilmember Mueller, your input on this topic as well, Vice Mayor Combs. I really appreciate it because I think it's important. I'm really concerned considering my 0.59 square miles has roughly, 6,000 to 7,000 people. And no, we haven't gotten information to everyone. We need to have a communication strategy for people who don't check the website every day, for people who don't check their email every day. We still need to have a hard copy of information, what's happening in our city. We cannot assume that everybody, all of our 35,000 plus residents are aware of everything. The fact that we have food insecurity exists throughout our city. It's not just in one area. We have housing insecurity that exists throughout our area. People are afraid. People need information. People need to be reassured. I know that the role of the mayor is to respond to inquiries from the public. So I believe that the council needs to respond. There was talk a little over a week ago between myself and Mr. Clay Curtin about doing a public service announcement so that we're all a part of it. We're all connected. We're all one city. And how do we share information is very important. I think communications needs to be added to our essential service. I know it says on there public information, but I think it needs to be clear what that public information is. We need to be doing more to get more information out. The volunteers they want to help us with that piece. How do you get information out? I don't have the answer. I just know that there's been a roadblock in communication someplace. I feel like we need to drive over that hump. And figure out how we can have a smooth ride the rest of the way. It doesn't make sense to not utilize people offering to help. I think there's 1,500 volunteers at the county level. And if we have volunteers already here, it just makes sense to try to create some type of communication network where we could have a better way of communicating with the public, with our residents, even though everybody doesn't use the same tool to access information. So all that to say, I support moving forward, figuring out what we can do with our volunteers. And the second is I'd like to see an essential service. I don't know if we have to amend the emergency order, but it needs to include something specific about a communication strategy because we are not reaching the entire city. Councilmember Carlton?
I agree. And I got a message today that broke my heart from someone who was embarrassed to say that she was having trouble buying food and was doing an outreach for anyone that wanted to donate seeds because she was willing to try and grow her own food in the backyard. And I think as a city, we also maybe need to put a place on our website that is a point of resource where whether you're a business that's getting ready to go under, an individual who can't for the first time find food, whatever the situation, we need to put a place that is a resource on the city website where people can go regardless of what their issue is related to COVID and be able to say, oh, these are the people in the county, these are the nonprofits, these are the different organizations that I need to contact to help me in whatever situation I have. And I think as a city, we must have a reference available for people in whatever situation they're having to be able to know who to contact. And I'll let Betsy speak because I see her hands up.
Before Betsy goes, Councilmember Mueller. Councilmember Mueller?
Yeah, thank you. So first off, I would want to say that because I didn't say it, but I want to commend staff because this transition during this time period to shelter in place and all the information that was reported was very impressive. So it's the amount of work that you all have done and adapted quickly is incredibly impressive. And I don't want that to be glossed over by anything else that's said as we just talk about policy going forward. You know, one thing that has really struck me that I did not think would be the case, and it's not a criticism. I'm not criticizing the district. I'm just surprised that in this pandemic, to my knowledge, the fire district hasn't had a meeting yet. And I really think at this point, and I've been sort of watching this, and I know some of the members of the fire district have wanted to have that meeting, and they're getting one scheduled this month. But I always thought in a situation like this, you know, we would have the Menlo Ready team that the fire district had trained up, and that there would be close collaboration with the fire district, with those members that they had trained up, and that we would be talking about joint work with the fire district. And so what I actually would suggest is instead of just, you know, our staff getting together and giving us a report, which I'm sure will be a magnificent report, is to actually have a study session with the fire district on what we're going to do with these Menlo CERT members that they trained, and talk about, hey, like, what are we doing here? How are we, you know, what are we doing here together on this? And the reason why is, you know, as we sit here and think about what's going on, this, you know, there are other things even beyond, like I know I talked about tracing, but the truth of the matter is this shelter in place is going to last a long time, whether or not it gets loosened up a little and then tightened up a little, loosened up a little, tightened up a little. We need people's help because we're talking about outreach now. We need people's help talking to their neighbors, getting people to continue to shelter in place. It's getting very difficult to get people to want to stay in their homes, and having team members out in the community just helping us deliver that message is going to be helpful. So, and I do think that as we now have gotten the city buttoned up into a new way of doing things, that we do have to try to look at communication to a public that is growing very restless, sheltering in place. So I support those sentiments, and it's not in any way a criticism of what we've done in the past. We've, you know, staff has lifted huge mountains to get us to where we are now. But I do think that we're entering a new phase where we really have the doldrums of people just getting very tired of being in their homes. And to the extent that we can activate with our fire district and figure out who's doing what when it comes to our volunteers, and then create a communication effort to get out there and start reaching people to just encourage them to continue to be vigilant. I think both those things will be to the benefit of the city long term.
Thank you, Councilmember Mueller. Councilmember Nash?
Ray said it more beautifully than I could on many of the issues. The couple of things that I wanted to add are, I think just reiterating that I think one of the pieces of the communication that we really need to emphasize is the rationale for why we're doing this. Much of our communications start out with the history, and I think at this point people know that. And I think that putting some rationale and maybe some information about why we're doing this, not how we got here, would be beneficial at this point. To Councilmember Carlton's point about getting resources on the website, there are the resources on the website. It's just you really have to dig for it. They're on the Kobit page that the city has set up, which has lots of information. But the top pieces are all about the city news regarding COVID, and you have to keep scrolling and scrolling, which I didn't do for a while, until finally I kept looking for something else has to be here, and it's all there, or much of it's there. But you do have to keep getting down to the bottom of the website. So perhaps that's an opportunity there to emphasize some of that. Another piece is using electronic signs for the COVID information. I know that some of the other, anyway, that just about like our website or this county's website and the 211 number, I think would be beneficial. And then also, I think Kat mentioned this a meeting or two ago, or maybe it was that trying to get the city people engaged, and perhaps if we did some sort of citywide activity where we had people make signs and put them out in their front yard or in a window or something about thank you to the essential workers too, and maybe doing it their own way. Lots of people are, well, across the world are doing this, and I think it's really uplifting and recognizes the healthcare workers, the emergency responders, but also the folks who are keeping our restaurants and our grocery stores and our shop. All of them are all out there doing their best on the front line, taking some risk. And I think it would be great if maybe we try and get some messaging out there, and that would be something that might be fun for kids to do, families, and also be sort of uplifting for the community. And it could be something unique for Menlo Park. And
Councilmember Carlton.
I don't know if this is where I bring this up, and if it's not, please let me know and I'll move it to another area. You touched on the grocery workers. I personally, and I've spoken to the mayor about this, I believe the people at Trader Joe's and at Safeway are frontline, they're first responders. If we don't have people selling us groceries, as a city, we're going to fall to our knees. They are first responders. These are people putting their life on the line to make sure that we get the food and the things necessary to sustain life in our city. And I would like to put a note forward to the county and to the medical people to make sure that the people that are working for our grocery stores are listed as first responders in how they get targeted for getting the testing, because I feel like they should be up at first responder level for when someone at Trader Joe's feels sick. I'm told like a whole group may not be able to go to work if they've worked with that individual, and we need to make sure that we communicate to the powers that be that are doing the testing as a city to make sure that they get first line testing as well, to make sure that we protect them as well as we protect our other first responders.
Thank you, Councilmember Carlton. And on that note, we are going to take a brief break. Thank you.
So at this time, I'm going to ask all of the city council members to turn off your webcams, mute your mics, and I will display a message for the public letting them know that we will be returning very shortly. Thank you. At this time, I'll ask the remaining city council members to re-engage their webcams. And as soon as we have a quorum on screen, the mayor will continue the meeting. As soon as Vice Mayor Combs returns, we can restart the meeting.
Thank you. Councilmember Mueller, you have a question?
Actually, I wanted to say, I wanted to see if we could sort of I was going to try to move us toward wrapping up by saying that I can support staff's, the priorities that staff has outlined. I'd like to add to it that staff would look into putting together a study session with a joint, I don't know if it's not a study session, but a joint session with the fire meeting on the issue of utilization of the volunteers. And then so I would just offer that now, and then also to direct staff to come back with an idea for increased outreach at our next meeting to be discussed. And then with that, hopefully we can, I don't know if anyone wanted to add anything to that, but I was hoping that I could just, that we could wrap up and move on to the next item. So those would be that would be my, I guess, my motion.
Can you repeat the motion?
Yeah, so support the directive, support the priorities outlined in the staff report, add to it that staff will come back with a enhanced communication plan for consideration at the next council meeting, and that the staff will also meet with the fire district to determine to investigate putting together a joint session on utilization of the community volunteers. Those are the only things that I heard true consensus on this evening to move forward.
I'd second that.
Councilmember Nash?
I guess the only other piece of it would be on the residential, on construction, that I agree with what has been said. I think there was consensus that we will keep our construction on hold as we've currently decided, as we currently have it, and we'd look at it again in a couple of weeks. And I don't care if that's part of the motion or not, just so we have consensus on it.
Yeah, I'll leave it as, I can go ahead and make it a friendly amendment to the motion that we would look at it or revisit it again. But instead of a couple weeks, what I would say when staff indicates when staff has determined that there's a material change that the council would want to consider it on the next agenda. So actually, I'm fine with 2 weeks. That's fine. If something comes up, staff can bring it to us. So I'm fine with 2 weeks.
I'll continue my second on 2 weeks.
Okay.
So the grants? Or did you have something you wanted to add? Yeah, Vice Mayor Combs.
Yeah, I'm good with everything that's been said.
Okay. I'm comfortable with everything is said. I just would like to emphasize a communication plan sooner than later. There are still community members we have not reached, in our 35,000 population city. So I'd like to stress that. And I also would like to see the 5 of us do some type of public service announcement together. And now it can be done via, right before our meeting. So I would like to see it happen. And then the other piece is that we need to make sure that our communication is at minimum in English and in Spanish. I'm not sure what that is going to look like as far as just on a website or just printed. I'm not sure, but we definitely need to have both languages. Councilmember Wheeler, you were about to say something?
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and then add as a friendly amendment to the motion that the communication plan that they're going to check in with us would place equity issues at the top level.
Only if we're going to define equity.
I'll let you define it in your discussions with staff to make sure you have the right definition. How about that?
I would like for it to be a council decision, but if you'd like me to do it, I'll take it. Thank you.
I mean, we can try to do a council. I'm just trying to move the motion along. If you want to talk about that tonight, we can, or we can bring it up a different night. But I want to make sure, the point is I want to make sure that we hit all underserved populations with the communications and make sure that that's highlighted in the communication plan. So.
Okay. So Judy, do you have all of that? Or do we need to restate anything?
Fortunately, I have the recording I can refer back to, as long as you're comfortable making the motion with friendly amendments as previously stated. We can go ahead, ask for a second and take a vote. I do want to confirm that staff is fine with the motion and understand direction.
Thank you.
And again, I just want to express how much we're appreciative of staff's work. Like it's not to be understated.
So Cara, oh, thank you. Starla.
Yeah,
just
I think
confirming the motion. Thank you.
We understand.
So we have a motion from Councilmember Mueller, and I believe it was friendly amendments from Councilmember Nash, and a second by Councilmember Carlton, or was it a second by Nash? Second by Councilmember Carlton.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So by a roll call vote, Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Combs?
Yes.
Councilmember Carlton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nash?
Yes.
Councilmember Mueller?
Yes.
And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Herring. So now we will go to the next agenda item, which is H3. And that is to consider a resolution number 6553, affirming Menlo Park's commitment to values of equity, fairness, and justice in responding to COVID-19. And to introduce this item is our management analyst, John Passman.
Madam Mayor, Cara Silver, Interim City Attorney. This is a resolution that was proposed by the National League of Cities in response to COVID-19, and it requests and highlights the fact that equity issues should be taken into account when responding to COVID-19. And this matter was placed on the agenda by the mayor, and I think that the mayor has a few words to say about it.
Thank you, Cara. I appreciate it. Cara emailed me, Ms. Silver emailed me this, the resolution just under a week ago. And I thought it was a good time to at least bring this back into discussion. I also asked that the city attach to this item the letter from San Mateo County supporting the efforts of Menlo Park joining GARE, Government Alliance on Racial Equity. I believe the resolution is a step towards that, and I'm hoping at some point, definitely this year, we will become members of GARE so that we can start creating cohorts within the city's departments. Now we have challenging times right now that are tough on all of us, but particularly difficult for people who have been struggling since before the crisis. We have seen in our own city that the economic boom does not reach everyone equally, and that our working population, the elderly and the unhoused, continue to be vulnerable. In the face of the current crisis, we as public officials have to quickly analyze complex information, make quick decisions, and understand that our decisions will have big impacts on those we serve. And so in light of that, I believe that this resolution is a step towards that. It's a continued commitment from the city of Menlo Park on how we see, treat, and respect all of our residents, our staff, our council. It's about the city as a whole. And on that note, I do have a few items on here that I would like to see changed, unless someone else has some input that they'd like me to hear first. Councilmember Nash.
I have some input, but I'd be very happy to go after you and see whether I would prefer if you go first, but I would like a chance to provide input at the end.
Oh, Ms. Herring, you popped up on the screen.
Yes. Just wanted to know if this is an appropriate time to call for public comment, or do you want to make your recommendations first?
We'll call for public comment.
Okay. So I do not have any web form previously received public comment. So at this time, if you have a comment on the current item, which is item H3 regarding resolution number 6553, affirming Menlo Park's commitment to values as listed on the screen. If you have a public comment for this item, please use the hand function next to your name. We will unmute your microphone and allow you 3 minutes of public comment. If you do not have the hand function, please use the question mark function and we will be able to read your public comment to the City Council. At this time, I do have one hand raised. It is Julie Shanson. I'm going to unmute your mic, Julie. Julie, are you able to hear us okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
All right. And we are able to hear you. I'll give you the floor for the 3 minutes.
Thank you, City Council members and Mayor Taylor. I appreciate you putting this in at 10:10 on a Tuesday night during a crisis. I don't, and I want to just express my support for your support of this issue. Thank you.
At this time, I see no further public comment and I will return the meeting to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Herron, and thank you, Ms. Shanson, for your short and direct public comment. Councilman Nash.
So I had one comment, and that is on the wording of the first point of the resolution. And in the Race Equity and Leadership Council of the National Cities, they actually propose using the phrasing committed to centering racial equality in our community's responses. In our report, it's staff has proposed committed to considering racial equality in the city's responses. I would actually suggest that we say committed to treating racial equity as a central value in the city's responses. interim proposal.
Thank you. I appreciate your input, Councilmember Nash, and I agree with you. One of my comments was to draw a line through considering, just to remove it. But what you presented works for me as well. Was that your own, Councilmember Carlton?
Sure. I would actually say I would get rid of considering and racial. The city of Menlo Park is committed to equality in the city's responses, whether it has to do with race or whether it has to do with someone's socioeconomic level. Everyone should be treated with the same amount of dignity and respect and equality in how we respond to things.
I actually misspoke, and I was using the word equality when it should be equity.
Was there any other part of the resolution that you wanted input on or had some input? Councilmember Carlton.
I had a meeting this morning with the California League of Cities LGBTQ caucus and with the leadership educational, we just changed the name, the LGBT Leadership Educational Institute, who thought that this was wonderful in dealing with all aspects of equality as we move forward on the COVID issue. It shouldn't matter your race, it shouldn't matter your sexual identification, it shouldn't matter your social economic, it shouldn't matter at all. All people across the board should be treated with the equality and equity. And so I think it's great that you're bringing this forward, and I have discussed it with them, and we all think it's a wonderful thing to bring forward.
Thank you. Were there any other recommendations for the language in here? On number 2, the city of Menlo Park will pay special attention to protecting our most vulnerable residents. So if we could take out its and put our. And on number 7, the city of Menlo Park commits to working with and supporting the county of San Mateo's efforts in lifting up the medical and social needs of most of its marginal communities. I think the language from the Council of Cities, the National League of Cities, I think had more, the information was a little different. It says our city commits to lifting up the medical and social needs of the most marginalized members of our communities, sharing examples of how centering their needs can ensure that we are all safe and healthy. So I'd rather use the language that was originally in the National League of Cities. I don't know if anybody had any input on that, suggestions, concerns. And I believe that was it. Ms. Silver.
Yes, thank you. So I think I was able to track most of those changes. With respect to the change on number 7, we did talk about this at a staff level, and because traditionally cities don't provide medical and social services, that's the function of a county government and a state government. We referenced the county. That was our thinking. It is the case that during this, COVID-19 emergency, cities are starting to provide certainly some level of social services, but we didn't want to, commit the city to providing services that it's just not equipped to provide.
Well, looking at the geography of our city, actually District 1 is the only area that doesn't have any type of medical resources. So keeping that in mind, that there isn't anything here. So, and not that the city would be providing it, but if there was opportunity, and I know that there's a mobile health clinic, there are some mobile clinics, but that was why I wanted to have it in there. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, and then, Starla, I don't know if you have anything further on number 7.
No, I think this is certainly up to the council. I think the only point we wanted to make is we're not directly supplying medical attention, and so we didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So, but it's clearly up to the council. If you're comfortable with the different wording, knowing that we're not providing the services directly, that's fine.
Does anyone else on council have any input on this item? Councilmember Carlton?
Yeah, I'm curious, what medical services do we provide, period? I mean, we might have a doctor's office somewhere, but I'm just asking, what medical services do we provide?
So we do provide some tertiary medical services at the senior center, but other than that, none that I'm aware of.
Okay, so it's only in the District 1 that we provide medical services?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
Okay.
And medical services might be overstating it. It's more like wellness checks and
And that's a service that's provided through the senior center. So it's not like it's open to anybody, certain age, certain time.
Correct.
Okay.
Then did we have a resolution on paragraph 1? I heard 2 different suggestions.
How about we put the city of Menlo Park is committed to all aspects of racial equity in the city's response to COVID-19. And I see Councilmember Mueller has a question or comment.
No, I was going to try to just offer a suggestion because so one of the things that we can talk about is not whether it's not, it doesn't have to, we don't have to be limited to by what we do, but we can be, but we can use language that says that we're going to be aspirational in planning to make that when resources are allocated, that they're allocated unlike with respect to medical in a way that's equitable. And so where that would come up would so for instance, if the crisis got terrible and we had a field hospital, we would make sure that we had field treatment taking place, that we were going to do that in an equitable manner, just like how we do now with public safety, how we were striving to plan for that with public safety and with our fire district. And the idea is that as the crisis continues and we are planning how we disperse resources, that we're going to be doing that in a way that's equitable and trying to make certain that when medical resources are deployed, they're equitable, or when any type of resource is deployed, it's equitable. I think that we can create language as such that satisfies that obviously we don't do these things in the normal course of business, but to the extent that there's an emergency scenario taking place now and we'll be involved in a planning process, we're going to do our darndest to make sure that everybody has access. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Mueller. That's very helpful. Ms. Silver, did you have any other comments or questions?
Yes, I think we still, I don't know if you've addressed Councilmember Carlton's question about adding in other aspects of equity other than racial equity.
So if we, can we use the language, all aspects of equity?
Yes.
And then that would be inclusive?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Councilmember Carlton?
I was just going to make the motion to approve this.
Thank you. We have a second by Councilmember Nash.
So we have a motion on the floor to approve the resolution, including the edits made and noted by Interim City Attorney Cara Silver. We have a motion by Councilmember Carlton, a second by Councilmember Nash. Doing a roll call vote. Mayor Taylor, your vote?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Combs?
Yes.
Councilmember Carlton?
Sorry, yes.
Councilmember Nash?
Yes.
Councilmember Mueller, do you have a comment or are you ready to vote?
I can vote yes.
Thank you, sir. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And I believe that was is that the last item on the agenda? Are there any council member reports? Is there a city manager report?
There is. Just really quickly, Judy, can you throw up those pictures of the farmers market? We did just want the council to know that John Passman has been working with both of the farmers markets, and I think the results have been successful. People are being more cooperative, exhibiting social distancing, and it is keeping both of those markets alive. So that's really good news, I think. So that's number one. Number two, I think most of you probably all know this already, but Gina Sudaria has been appointed the new superintendent for the Ravenswood City School District. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Gina. I've worked with her a little bit, and I think she's an exemplary human being, and I look forward to working with her more. Third, we were notified today, both the chief and I, and perhaps others, that there is a company in Mountain View who has been granted a permit to operate two autonomous vehicles in our larger area. So parts of Santa Clara and San Mateo County. I think basically from Redwood City down to Sunnyvale. So they're not on the road yet, but they will be, and they will be independently driven by the robots. So that'll be a new world for us. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson, Starla Jerome Robinson. Councilmember Nash.
Two questions on the last point. One, I assume they're not an essential service, so that they will not be operating at this point.
Correct.
Okay, good. And then the second question, will they have a human passenger to as a backup or not?
They will not, but they will have a follow car. So, and I believe they're very small, and so they will be visibly evident as a robot-driven car. That's what I was told.
Councilmember Carlton.
I mentioned before that this might be coming, but I was just letting you guys know that I arranged for my friend, and the 100 test kits have been delivered to the fire district for first responders, so that we have test kits readily available for anyone and everyone that needs them on a fast basis to make sure that they get tested and can continue their work as first responders. So those 100 test kits were donated, and I send a big shout out to the Yobi Benjamin, to the individual that donated them.
Thank you. Okay, is there anything else? This meeting is adjourned.
One quick item, Mayor Taylor. We do need to report out of closed session, if any.
So, Ms. Cara Silver, do we have a report out, excuse me, Ms. Darla Jerome Robinson, do we have a report out from
Right.
closed session?
So just, I think the council has made a decision to defer the recruitment of city attorney for some period of time, and we'll be checking in mid-summer to restart that process.
Thank you. Councilmember Nash.
I would just, is it appropriate at this point to say anything about the census? And I don't know that I'd be the most appropriate person, but just to encourage people to participate.
Great.
Okay, so just.
I'll plus one that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder, Councilmember Nash. The census is still active. Encourage all of your community members, your neighbors to participate online, in the mail, or over the phone. And now this meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.
Thank you all.